the same time boost transatlantic energy trade. The US remains the EU's largest supplier of LNG, and the EU remains the largest client for the United States. At the same time, diversification is crucial to ensure energy security. The EU and the US are strategic partners on global energy security, and we are ready to discuss energy issues with the new administration. The EU is committed to safeguarding the democratic values and freedoms of its citizens, including freedom of speech. The EU will continue to use its tools and mechanisms to protect and promote human rights, rule of law and democratic principles, both at home and globally. President, honourable members, Commissioner, changes are unfolding in Washington. We hope to launch a constructive exchange with the new administration to fully clarify the intention of our American partners on all topics that concern us. We have learned from history that Europe and US are stronger together. We should now reflect collectively on how we can effectively uphold these partnerships in new circumstances, and that requires EU unity. EU foreign affairs ministers will discuss transatlantic relations at the next meeting on 27 January, and shortly after, on 3rd February, EU leaders will continue the exchange at the retreat, which focuses on defence and security. Thank you very much for your attention.
Grazie, Ministro.
Thank you very much indeed, Minister. Now, on behalf of the Commission, Commissioner Šefčovič.
Honourable members of the European Parliament, dear Minister, the European Union and the United States share deep friendship and alliance. The transatlantic relationship is founded on a shared history and strong bonds. For decades, this partnership has been a cornerstone of peace, security and economic growth. What was true yesterday remains true today and will hold true tomorrow. With President Trump's inauguration yesterday, the European Union stands therefore ready to deepen and strengthen this vital relationship. We will engage in meaningful dialogue, discuss shared interests and continue to advance our work to address geopolitical challenges together. And in our engagement with the new administration, the European Commission will remain unwavering in upholding the EU's priorities and interests. We will continue to support an inclusive, rules-based multilateral system anchored in the principles of the UN Charter. This includes upholding the sovereignty, territorial integrity and inviolability of borders. We will remain and we will maintain our unwavering commitment to Ukraine, providing sustained political, financial, economic, humanitarian, military and diplomatic support for as long as it takes. We will support achieving a comprehensive, just and lasting peace. The EU also remains fully committed to safeguarding the democratic values and freedoms of its citizens, especially the freedom of speech and the integrity of electoral processes. We will remain focused on our pressing challenges. Strengthening our economy, fostering innovation and promoting competitiveness will remain key priorities. This includes being consistent and supportive when it comes to clean and digital technologies like batteries and related newly grown industries. Honourable members, we take note of the memorandum on an America First trade policy adopted yesterday by the US President Donald Trump. The transatlantic trade and investment relationship is a key artery of the global economy. No other economies in the world are as integrated as we are. Entire supply chains stretch on both sides of the Atlantic. The EU and the US have the largest bilateral trade and investment relationship in the world, supporting more than 16 million jobs and accounting for 42% of the global GDP. In 2023 alone, Bilateral trade flows reached 1.6 trillion euros, 807 billion of trade in goods, and 680 billion euros of trade in services. More than 4 billion of goods and services cross the Atlantic every day. European companies in the US employ 3.5 million Americans, and another million American jobs depend directly on trade with Europe. Equally, our bilateral investment flows are unrivaled. The EU and US have more than 5 trillion euros invested in their respective economies, and of all American assets abroad, 2/3 are in Europe. The EU wants to leverage this robust relationship to enhance growth, maintain technological leadership, and boost resilient supply chains. It would no doubt be advantageous for the EU and the US to work together across the board. So we will continue to be a strong partner, ready to engage and cooperate as a matter of priority, and pursue a positive agenda with the US, discussing common interest and stand ready to negotiate. We will be pragmatic. But the EU will also stand by its principles and will be prepared to defend its legitimate interest if this is necessary. We take note of today's decision by the new US administration regarding energy production and exports. The EU already is the largest importer of the US liquefied natural gas, providing over 50% of our LNG. And the Commission is ready to work with the new administration to further strengthen this strategic cooperation as we work to strengthen our own energy security. The EU regrets the decision by the United States to withdraw from the Paris Agreement, which we believe continues to be the best hope for us all. For more than a decade, we have worked side by side with our American friends to design and implement the Paris Agreement. Companies in both Europe and America are investing in climate action, in clean technologies, and in bringing their benefits to the citizens. So Europe will stay the course and work to ensure that this continues both at home, for example through the upcoming Clean Industrial Deal, and abroad with all nations that want to protect nature and stop global warming. The EU looks forward to working closely with the new US administration to tackle pressing global challenges. A lot is at stake for both sides, more so as the rules of engagement between global powers are changing. We will address shared priorities for prosperity and international security, reaffirming the enduring strengths of the transatlantic partnership. Thank you, Madam President.
Grazie a lei, Commissario.
Thank you very much indeed, Commissioner Šefčovič. The first speaker on behalf of the EPP is Mr. Sherba.
Szanowna
Madam Commissioner, Minister, ladies and gentlemen, the Americans have spoken, and we have to do what we have to do. I would like to say that we are at the verge of a new era in our relationship with the US. We have heard a lot during the President's inauguration. This cooperation is not going to be easy, but we need to remain united. For us, the most important issue is our safety and security, and this is the peace in Ukraine that is the priority, both for us and for the US. It's Russia who doesn't want it. It's Russia who continues this war of aggression. Ukraine can have peace only once it is independent and sovereign, and its safety is guaranteed. And for that to happen, it needs to be involved in negotiating the peace. I would like to say very clearly that we also have to do a lot in Europe. The European Union of Defense must become reality. It's enough, no more words, soft law, soft talk, is not enough. We need to move on and show our force, our power. Right now, our safety, our security is in our own hands. So our goal, and it is the goal of the Polish presidency, is to keep Europe united, united in the name of safety and security. This is our investment in the future, and our relationship with the US has to be pragmatic. It is a partnership, but it has to be centered on the issue of security. Thank you.
Grazie onorevole. Prego onorevole Van Bremt.
Thank you very much indeed. The next speaker is Ms. Van Bremt.
Voorzitter, commissaris, collega's.
President, colleagues, it is self-evident that our transatlantic relations are under great pressure in terms of trade policy and in other areas too, since the election of Donald Trump. But there's no point in simply focusing entirely on Trump, or for that matter, on Elon Musk. We can't allow our action and our policies to be determined by them. We need to invest in our own future, in our support for Ukraine, our economy, our industry, our energy, and our prosperity. Of course, we don't want to close ourselves off from the rest of the world. On the contrary, Trump and Putin are opting for confrontation very clearly. We need to opt for cooperation. We need to do this with the Indo-Pacific countries, with Latin America. We need to prioritize diplomacy, international trade, cooperation and dialogue. We need to continue strong in the belief in our own values, cooperation where it is possible, but on the basis of very clear lines. We need to delimit our policies and our principles. For example, tearing up the Green Deal, no pasarán, and import tariffs is another red line. So we need to be clear about our red lines. We need to be clear about our principles. The extreme right may not like this, but the future, I have news for you, is that the future of Europe is not Chinese, it is not American, it is not Russian, it is European. And we must take our own future firmly, irretrievably into our own hands. Thank you. The next speaker is Mr. Bardella on behalf of the Patriots.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Colleagues, Donald Trump's return to the presidency and the first hours of his presidency have sent a clear message out to the rest of the world: America first. His triumphal election is thanks to the middle class and business owners. But many of his voters' values have been mocked. But we've seen many problems there with mass immigration, for example. But in Europe, people want to regain their identities and have hope in the future. But let's not be naive. President Trump will defend America's interests first and foremost. And from an American point of view, he is right to do so. There is the prospect of trade tensions and a new geopolitical situation. We have concerns in our companies, industries, and our farmers. Europeans must not remain passive to what's happening in the future. We need to see stronger nations on the international stage. And Trump's America is challenging France and all European countries. And here in this cycle over the past few years, we've seen many policies in Brussels criticised, ideological decisions, failures, reducing economic growth and a shift towards economic ruin, poor energy policy, naivety vis-à-vis all of the big powers of the world. The EU in Brussels says that it has innovated, but it has done so by passing too much regulation, through over-regulation. You promised people that if they concede some of their sovereignty, they will have power, but we're not seeing that. And if we want to be a key partner in this world, we must focus on what brings Europeans together. Solidarity, for example. If we should do that together, and then we will move on. Thank you.
Onorevole Fidanza.
Thank you, Mr. Bardella. The next speaker is Mr. Fidanza on behalf of the ECR. Thank you, President, Commissioner, colleagues. On the 5th of November, we heard the usual litanies from the left about the future which lay ahead for Europe and a resistance to the global trends. Things haven't changed. The Conservatives, of course, welcome the election of Trump, who wants to tackle illegal migration, drugs cartels. Those who are focused on freedom of expression are delighted that social media is finding its way back to genuinely encompassing this. We need to work towards a proper peace for Ukraine. As far as NATO is concerned, Trump is reminding us our proper responsibilities. For decades, we have simply been subsidizing our security on the basis of America. Greenland, well, that is a topic which does actually affect Europe. The activism of both China and Russia has a big impact on strategic security and equilibrium. So here, President Trump is opening up for us opportunities for us to make choices regarding industry, for example, focusing on the Atlantic relations rather than simply obsessing with the Green Deal and links to China in the basis of strategic autonomy. He's giving us an opportunity to rekindle our transatlantic relationship. There may be tariffs, but this is something we can consider in due course. Yesterday, a new America was born. Now it's time to witness the rebirth of Europe. Thank you.
Prego, onorevole Ayer, a nome del gruppo di...
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Ms. Ayer for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam President. Commissioner, colleagues, the US has a new president. We all are familiar with his style. Let's be clear. Yes, the US has been and will remain a partner. A partnership goes two ways, though, and we've had enough of having the younger brother complex. There's not been a word spoken about Europe, about NATO, about Ukraine. They're withdrawing from the WHO. Trump means America folding in on itself, America first. Tough word. We know that the only method that works is multilateralism, and we will continue to defend it. But let us not be fooled. Donald Trump makes no secret of his trade aggressiveness and American interest. American businesses need our market. Will Trump be explaining to American businesses that they can no longer access European markets on the same conditions because there will be customs duties to enter the European market? Of course not. We must not be weak either. The second challenge is geopolitical, a sovereign Europe which is powerful and exercises influence. This is imperative and in everybody's interest, including the interest of the US. This is where our security and our unity resides. The territory of our member states in Greenland or elsewhere is not for sale. Let us safeguard our sovereignty. Finally, we face a democratic challenge. We have seen Elon Musk's X algorithm take power. I wanted to say something about freedom of expression, and I will be very clear. The topic is not Elon Musk's political opinions. The issue is that we cannot allow some groups to spew hatred on others. That reduces everybody to silence. Minorities and a very big majority of people who actually do respect others, what happens to their freedoms? Renew Europe demands that the Commission applies the sanctions that have been imposed on X. What is the point, Mr. Commissioner, of adopting laws in this Parliament if the Commission does not come through and apply them? Musk, Trump and their cronies have an ideological agenda in Europe. They want to undermine our democracies. This is a political and ideological fight that we must wage. Facing these challenges, the good news is that we are the majority who want to actually act, and we need to get to work. Thank you.
Onorevole, prego, onorevole.
Thank you very much indeed. The next speaker on behalf of the Greens is Mr. Lagodinsky. Minute and a half.
Congratulations, President Trump. You are our reality. Yesterday we saw it, we heard it, we listened carefully. We understand clearly that now is Europe's moment to shine. With Trump being president, we don't have a choice but mature into a united global power that is self-conscious, value-driven, and cooperative. A union of democracies that take responsibility. Many Europeans understand it, but they question, can we make it? Yes, we can. We can stand for Ukraine forcefully and build our own defense with our American friends, and if necessary, also without. Yes, we can. We can serve as an example that trade is the answer to wars and cooperation is the only answer to nationalism. Yes, we can. We can be a safe home for all. A white male pensioner and a queer IT specialist and her wife and their children. In fact, we welcome those from Meta and X from US to European tech firms. Yes, we can. We can learn to disrupt and innovate, to be industry and AI applications that serve people, not oligarchs. And yes, we can become a driver for green technologies, because our answer is not drill, baby, drill. Our answer is shine, baby, shine over generations. It's not going to be an easy path towards Europe that is confident and capable, but we shall walk it together, and together we trust, because yes, we can, and now we must.
Grazie, onorevole. Prego.
Thank you very much indeed. Mr. Clausen, on behalf of the left, 1.5 minutes.
Hvad gør vi, når verdens mest...
Thank you. What do we do when the most powerful man in the world threatens an EU country with economic pressure because he wants to simply annex a country and its people? What do we do when that same man says he will not refuse to use military means? And what do we do when the leader of the most powerful country in the world seriously believes that an entire country and its people can be bought and sold? Look at the official Commission response and how ministers are responding. Really, this leaves a lot to be desired. Countries like France and Germany have been supportive, but the EU as a whole has been very quiet. There's been many threats from Trump on Greenland and Denmark, but we don't seem to want to send out a clear message. So my question to the Commission, do you believe that silence is the way forward? Is it not better to send out a signal of unity and defend the rights of Greenlanders to decide what their own future should be? Would that not be better? Wouldn't it be better for the EU to also show that there are agreements with Greenland so that we could strengthen the ability to freely choose their future? Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Stoyanov for the ESN. President, Commissioner, the world is changing, and this is a good time for Europe. It is a time when Europe is called upon to take its rightful place on the world stage. Trump has been re-elected President of the United States, and this gives us an opportunity to establish a sovereign partnership, a partnership which can be established on the basis of equality from peer to peer. The European Union is claiming that we are failing to respect ourselves. How can we exact respect from others if we fail to respect ourselves? Here in Europe, we face a brutal war on our doorstep. Our security interests may differ from those of the US, but we can nevertheless represent our security interests ourselves. If Trump wishes to have a strong partner in the European Union, he has a long way to seek, because we don't have that on offer at the moment. We haven't found a diplomatic solution to the war, for example. We live in hope that somebody will propose a solution for us. We live in hope that the European Union will actually be able to grasp its future and define a future for itself, which enables it to engage with the Americans as equal. The European citizens and European industry and business indeed expect better.
Yesterday, the President declared his intention to put America first and to end its decline. Very good. That is why people vote for the President. They vote to end the crime and unsafety in the cities. I spent Christmas and New Year following through American states, 13 states I visited and 7,000 kilometers. All the people have moved out of cities ridden with the crime and drugs that are being imported through Mexico and through unstable borders. These are the facts that American citizens voted on, not on Trump personalities. Europe faces tectonic shifts ahead, and we must act decisively. As we anticipate President Trump's next moves in trade, we must simultaneously strengthen our trade partnerships worldwide and enhance our competitiveness. It is possible to make both Europe and America great, but only if we work together. We need to strengthen our diplomatic channels with the new administration while advocating for European producers and understanding the American business model. In the past, we failed to fully grasp the reality of the United States of America beyond Washington. Let's ensure we don't repeat that mistake in our engagement with the new administration. Thank you.
Grazie, onorevole. Prego,
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Maniatis.
Dear Commissioner, dear colleagues, since yesterday, a new era has dawned, and we're in uncharted waters. We are in an era of authoritarian capitalism and social media. The first statements by President Trump are quite telling. He withdrew from the Paris Agreement and the WHO. He pardoned those who tried to overthrow the result of the previous election. He's curtailing minority rights. He's changing the names of the Gulf of Mexico. He's making unbelievable statements about Greenland and Canada. So this is the new reality. We need to adapt, and we need to prepare ourselves for a time during which our traditional partnership with the U.S. will not be as stable as it used to be. There is it's not only about the new stance by the U.S. administration, but we have a different view in many matters. So we need to realize that we stand alone in the world chess game, and especially the European Council needs to do so. And until now, they've remained silent. We should not be frightened by this new perspective. We need to become more active based on international pluralism and multilateralism. We need to become more autonomous and proactive. It is time for Europe to take action separately in order to defend our geopolitical interests. Thank you.
Grazie, onorevole. Prego, onorevole.
Thank you very much indeed. The next speaker is Mr. Tanjiro Correa.
Senhora Presidente,
Madam President, Commissioner, yesterday a page was turned historically in the 21st century. Nothing will be the same after the election of Donald Trump. And I don't mean to say that that's better or worse, but it will be different. And this is a crucial point. In a world where we are approaching multipolarity rather than bilaterality, as Europe, well, we will be a key player in this multipolarity. We will need to be a complementary partner to the US and work with them. The culture is the same. We have the same civilizational foundations, the same principles, and we share the same values as the United States. We will not be able to stake our claim by fighting the US, collaborating with the US and the new administration, bringing new life to Europe and our countries. That is how we will move forward. Let's forget that idea of a shared army. We need to maintain our presence in NATO and our safety that way in the North Atlantic. Let us keep our cultural channels open as they have been in the past. They need to be beefed up in the future. This future can be bright if we want it to be, and it can and should be ours. And not just ours, but it belongs to our partners too. Thank you.
Grazie onorevole. Prego onorevole.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Bilan.
President, a change in the US administration always marks a new chapter in transatlantic relations. This is a moment when Europe must act with clarity, pragmatism and determination to strengthen our transatlantic partnership and shape the next 4 years. EU-US relations have been the cornerstone of Western security and stability for decades. NATO has guaranteed us peace, and commercial ties with the US have driven prosperity. Both of these elements are the bedrock of our shared strength. This is why I must express my deep disappointment with Prime Minister Donald Tusk's decision not to organise the transatlantic summit that President Andrzej Duda had strongly advocated for. In the current situation, this is a grave mistake with potentially significant consequences. At a time when some EU governments still question how they should react to President Trump's electoral victory, I cannot stress enough that Europe cannot afford to remain passive. In parallel, the EU must also prepare to invest more in our own interests. We should pursue more robust defence coordination with the EU, within the EU without duplicating NATO structures, and work proactively with Washington to bolster deterrence on our eastern flank. This House must seize this change in the White House as an opportunity to deepen our dialogue with the Trump administration. Thank you.
Grazie onorevole.
Thank you very much indeed, Vice President Willis.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam President, Commissioner. Relations between EU, Europeans and Americans go back 2 centuries, partnerships and solidarity, 2 centuries of privileged links. We've had highs and lows, which is the same for all forms of relationship. And the second mandate of Mr. Trump will be full of uncertainties, surprises, changes in mind, and we can also see confusion and changes in the balance of power. Now, I do not want to see a Europe that turns its back on its allies or a vassal state. We need to remain united and independent, and we need to show our ability to defend our strategic interests. We have strong economies, we have an integrated market with 450 million consumers. We need to move forward by putting what Mr. Draghi said in his report into practice, focusing on made in Europe, ensuring our energy independence and having low carbon economy, low carbon energy, thanks, for example, to nuclear energy. And finally, we need to take our fate into our own hands. Thank you.
Prego, onorevole Sbai.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sbai.
Chers collègues,
dear colleagues, in France, we talk about the rise of fascism as being the brown scourge, and this is unfortunately being inflicted on our democracies again. Justice, science, the free press, the media are all under attack, and these are the preconditions for the emergence of totalitarianism, as we've seen previously and as we're indeed witnessing now with the investiture of Trump. The first thing that you need to do if you are sick is recognize the reality and leave denial behind you. We need to protect, we need to identify the platforms that are distorting our reality, and we need to establish sustainable relationships with third countries. We need to focus on restructuring our economy in such a way that industry is prosperous and that this can deliver in turn for our citizens. Thank you.
If you want. Bay. Ok, prego onorevole Bay per un minuto.
Mr. Bay, for 1 minute.
30 secondi. Sorry, 30 seconds.
Merci, chers collègues. Vous avez...
Thank you, colleagues. Yesterday, you said that you would be leaving X. We resist in the ways that we can, and I see a number of comments in the face of Trump's election. He says he's going to defend American interests, America first. It's up to us to put Europe first, to put our foot down, to put an end to this Green Pact, which you supported, with all these taxes which kill our industries, our agriculture. We have to be able to defend our interests. Yes, the Americans are our partners, our friends, but they are also our competitors, our competition on the global stage. So we need to stop with these moral judgments. We need to look at reality as it is and realize that American is our competitor. They defend their interests. We need to defend ours.
Onorevole Sbai, per 30 secondi.
Ms. Bai, to reply. I have 2 things to say, Madam President. First of all, those who are attacking the Green Deal and economic regulation, who are attacking trade deals, are the self-same people who are seeking to influence our market and exploit it in order to maximize their profits. You, in the name of public freedom, are simply playing into the hands of the billionaire operators. Now, you talk about defending the European Buy Act, producing locally for local markets. I was talking precisely about that. I was talking about relocalizing our market.
Montero.
The next speaker is Ms. Montero. Thank you.
Gracias, Presidenta, Comisaria.
Thank you, President. Commissioner, we have a dangerous delinquent who is now President of the US. Donald Trump is currently the greatest threat to democracy and human rights. And the thing is that Donald Trump and the super rich friends he has who are leading the international stage now are not mad. They are simply proponents of a neoliberal system which is destroying life on this planet. We have big corporations and multimillionaires who can live above the law and determine the fate of humanity. They feed the far right, which will lead us to fight one-on-one. We are being told that we can't pay our rents because of migrants. You cannot be surprised by this authoritarian and violent foreign policy that Trump is putting forward, because for years we have been subject to this foreign policy. It was aggressive even before Trump, and it was unilateral. If the US invades European territory, what international law will you rely on, commissioners? The same laws that you appeal to in Gaza? Madam Ursula von der Leyen and has spoken out. Giorgia Meloni represents Trump in Europe, and some have been very proud to put her at the centre stage in Europe. We are at a dead end where Europe is subject to the US economic and military interests. Sooner or later, it will be the peoples of Europe who will have to rise up in the defence of humanity and human rights. Thank you.
Grazie onorevole, prego onorevole Anderson.
Anderson.
Thank you. Donald Trump's inauguration speech, what a breath of fresh air, marked the beginning of a golden age. Donald Trump will restore inner security by closing the border and deporting all illegal immigrants. He called out the climate change as the hoax it is, and he will end this gigantic taxpayers' milking machine called the Green Deal. He will stop the overreach of the pharma lobby posing as WHO by withdrawing from it. In short, Donald Trump will undo all of the freedom, democracy and the rule of law undermining measures that you have been working so hard on imposing on the people. The EU has robbed the member states of their sovereignty, destroyed their economic power, devalued their currency, disenfranchised their citizens. All of this needs to stop. We need to go back to the foundation of democracy, rule of the people, for the people, by the people. And the beautiful sound of freedom ringing throughout the entire world yesterday should inspire us. Let's make Europe great again. And if the EU refuses, then guess what? We will just do it without you, but it will happen. Let's make Europe great again. Thank you.
Madam, is there a blue card from Mrs. De Mirelli, if you accept? Okay. Please, for 30 seconds.
Dass Sie die Frage zulassen. Ich weiß, dass
Now, not sure whether you want allow the question. I know you don't put much value on facts, so I would like to ask you about feelings. Now, how does it feel for the AfD to be supported by Elon Musk and to receive funding from the extreme right in the United States? Now, secondly, talk about peace, but we have 5% military spending from Germany has been demanded by Mr. Trump. Now, what about standing up for sovereignty and peace? How do you want to sell that to citizens?
First of all, I reject the premise of your question, which you slandered me in such a term that is unbecoming of this House, dignity of this House, and is certainly unbecoming of you being a member of this Parliament. If you just stop for a single second and looked what we have been doing in the past decades in our countries, like I said, disenfranchising people, censoring free speech. I mean, had there been free speech during the COVID madness, millions of lives would have been saved because people would have known that this mRNA injection was not helpful, not at all. It was dreadful, actually.
Is there another blue card for you? Onorevole. From Mr. Saramo, if you accept. Okay, for 30 seconds, Mr. Saramo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to know how much oil and gas does Germany have? Because you want to support Trump, who is fighting against Europe, who is threatening us with tariffs against German labor, against German products. Why are you supporting Trump that is threatening Greenland, part of Denmark? Why are you supporting Trump, who is definitely against us, against just normal European people and European democracy?
Number one, Donald Trump is not against us, the people. Donald Trump is against the globalitarian misanthropists. On the question, how much gas and oil Germany has, unfortunately, nothing. But when Donald Trump pointed that out at the UN, then that we were dependent upon Russian gas, the entire German government that was present laughed their butts off because he made such a ridiculous statement. Well, turns out he was right, wasn't he? We were dependent upon Russian gas. Yes, we are dependent on that, and I'm confident Donald Trump will be solving these issues. And by the way, the Russian gas was not shut off by the Russians, it was shut off by ourselves. Stupid us.
Grazie, onorevole.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Lazarus.
Dear colleagues, Chair, I wanted to have a different beginning for this speech, but I was amazed that I was asked to take this sweater off because it had the flag of the United States. No, it's just a Ralph Lauren sweater. Maybe you have something against Ralph Lauren because he provided a dress for Melanie Trump. I wanted to tell you something else, actually. From what I understand from the Commission and the Council, there are concerns related to energy security and to the war in Ukraine. The war in Ukraine will be solved immediately by Trump. He said so, and we trust him. So some of you will lose their jobs here in Brussels and Strasbourg. And energy security in the European Union should be energy security of each member state of the European Union. Well, in Romania, a country at the borders of the empire where I come from, after closing down the mines and after you have intervened with different NGOs showing us that we have to protect the environment, which blocked some water plants, we lost energy security, and because we are exporters, gas exporters, we are speaking about gas throughout Europe, and when they come back to us, our citizens have to pay very high prices. How should we have energy security in Romania and in the European Union if we act as we do? I think that Trump wouldn't do that in the United States because the European Union is as the United States of America, several states. Let's treat them all equally. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. May I kindly ask colleagues not to exhibit symbols which are banned by the rules during the course of the debate. Please take note of that, colleagues. Mr. McAllister.
Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, as we have heard today during this debate, the United States is and remains our most important NATO ally and our biggest trading partner. This means, if we want or not, we need to proactively explore common interest with the new Trump administration, even when our priorities don't always align. And indeed, we witnessed yesterday that our positions differ on important issues, sadly. We need to prepare responses. The European Union should anticipate US foreign policy shifts and their potential challenges, preparing our responses more in advance. We need to rally partners. We are not alone here in Europe in our concerns about the next 4 years. We must rally our like-minded partners to minimize disruptions and adopt a coordinated approach. And finally, we need to deliver on key goals. If there is any time for us as European Union to act swiftly, it is now, and unity is key. Remaining transatlantic and becoming more European will be the way forward. Thank you very much.
Grazie onorevole, prego onorevole Benifei.
Thank you very much, Mr. Benifei.
Donald Trump si è nuovamente
Donald Trump is back in the White House and has announced a new golden era for the US. He is intent on taking revenge against anyone who has benefited at the expense of the US over recent years. In the wake of his inauguration, and we've seen all these tech bros, leaders of the world right and others gathered there, he has made some very worrying statements, worrying to our mind. The US president didn't even mention Europe. He didn't invite representatives of the EU to his inauguration. President von der Leyen has engaged with him to the extent that she said we need to be pragmatic in the way we respond. We need to defend our values and defend our principles. We need to negotiate in a clear-eyed way on energy, on tariffs, on economic security, and on security at a global level. We need to recognize that we are far apart in terms of regulation of digital space, but nevertheless, we need to maintain our principles, and we need to insist on respect for a constructive approach, which is what we adopt at all times here. The President of the Commission and the President of the Council need to be unequivocal, and I am sitting here in my capacity as Chairman of the US delegation. We will do everything we can to drive forward the European agenda on the basis of open-mindedness, openness to dialogue, but with the firm conviction that we stick to our own principles and the commitments we have made to our citizens, which are sacrosanct. Thank you. Mr. Buxade.
Pesadillas ayer.
Well, you have any nightmares last night? Don't worry, everything will be okay. Trump won the Electoral College, he won the popular vote, and best results in all social groups. And Ms. von der Leyen is president of the Commission because she won the votes of all of the losers. And the victory of Donald Trump and his entrance to the White House is a victory for the people, focusing on peace over war, democracy before tyranny, and common sense instead of wokeism. You know, you want to increase taxes and you want to censor opinions. Now, Trump yesterday said what many of us have been saying for a long time. We need to put an end to climate alarmism, and we need to have proper energy for the whole nation. And, you know, there are only two sexes as well. And nobody has the right to enter your home without permission. And if they do so, they should be removed. Now, without security, there's no freedom, and without freedom, there's no prosperity. Europeans do not want to be laboratory animals for your experiments, and they don't want censorship either. For decades now, Brussels has been taking decisions against the people, open borders to illegal migrants, dependence on third countries for energy, and persecuting patriotic leaders. It's over. C'est fini. The future is for the patriots. Thank you.
Grazie onorevole. Prego onorevole Tarsiu.
The next speaker is Mr. Tarsiu.
Madam Chair, dear colleagues, what was unavoidable happened. The greatest democracy of the world has a president who has already started to demolish the ideology by the radical left in America and export it throughout the world with full force. A warrant of European security and main trade partner for the European Union, the US leave behind the progressive politics and reclaim their right to produce wealth for this generation with all technological means and all available resources. For the European Union, it is the time to make a historic choice. We can stop the destruction of traditional industries, the only system which has proven trustworthy, or we can become captive of a world liberated by the constraints of utopian ideology. For the radical left in this parliament, the choice between freedom and dependency is very difficult. Thank you.
Kære kolleger, grønlændere. Grønland har...
Thank you. Greenland is a country which has a very proud population, a people which aspires to the values we know well: freedom, democracy, welfare state, the rule of law. And the future of Greenland should remain predicated on these principles, which they need to determine themselves. Greenland is not for sale, and it cannot be sold. That is a complete delusion. The future of Greenland must be determined only and exclusively by the Greenlanders themselves. In our modern world, it is the right of a people to decide whether they want to be dependent on anybody else or not. This is a sacrosanct right which they have. Of course, we should continue to work together with the Americans on, for example, things such as critical natural resources. But it must nevertheless be clear that the EU and Denmark stand firmly behind Greenland and the Greenlanders, who must determine their own future.
Sondvale.
Thank you, Mr. Sonville.
Now, if you have any doubt that whether there will be any consequences of the new US president, yesterday we were able to hear the truth. Now the US want to withdraw from international agreements, and they also want to withdraw from agreements to limit climate change. Denmark has a commonwealth with Greenland, and we should be very happy about that. But this is under threat through economic and military power if that commonwealth is not dismantled. It's been said that Denmark will agree to this at some point. This is a terrible rhetoric that we're hearing from Trump. It's awful. We would never accept that in Denmark or Greenland. It is right for the EU to react properly. Greenland belongs to the Greenlandic people, and in a world of threats from authoritarian politicians and presidents, we will not accept these. Greenland should be part of our European community.
Mr. de Laval.
The next speaker is Mr. Laval. President, I personally have no inclination to support the US regime, which is simply endorsed by a group of super rich people who'd be described as oligarchs anywhere else. But we have got to guard against hypocrisy. What is the difference between Trump, who says clearly what he thinks, and those who preceded him, who feigned compliance with democratic norms on many occasions? We need to open our eyes, and we need to be aware of the fact that colonialism lies a long time back. Trump is talking about a future which is actually going to be reality before long in terms of migrants, LGBTI, Ukraine, and many other things. We have got to be realistic. We've got to look at reality as it is, and we have got to get away from the obsession with neoliberal economics and the policies of the past, because otherwise we're going to continue to lose the support of our citizens, and we're simply going to condemn ourselves to irrelevance for the next centuries.
Ulrich.
The next,
Mr. Ulrich.
I believe that Donald Trump has... I believe there are many things to take inspiration from, renewed recognition of genders and stopping this gender ideology, for example, in sports events, making the fight against drugs stricter, stopping foreign aid until it's shown where it is headed, this foreign aid. And it also concerns Ukraine. And last but not least, restoration of freedom of thought and stopping the state censorship. In my view, all of these things are good. Of course, when it comes to enforcing this agenda, Mr. Trump will not have it easy, but if people in the United States have managed to do it before him, I believe that such a change will gradually also come here to the European Union. And to speak on my behalf, I cannot wait for a day when we'll have similar changes, announcing similar changes in the EU, together with colleagues here at the premises of the European Parliament. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Mrs. Bekova.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Commissioner, do you know why the European voters are leaning towards radical parties? Because they feel that they are being betrayed. And we had betrayed them also in favor of an illusion that with the US we are in a win-win situation, which has not been the case for 10 years already. But we are responsible for our downfall, so to say, European passivity and servility, and also the newly introduced activity of the newly elected Commission and refusing to accept the reality, and also the flurry of legislative nonsense that we produce. EU has to respond pragmatically and very strictly. And as we see in, for example, the select Prime Minister, Robert Fico, that's what the EU needs currently, sovereign and pragmatic solutions, not being blindly following any values which the partners are ultimately going to turn against us. And this has been proven by the victory of Trump. So congratulations to Trump, and I believe that he has opened our eyes finally to the reality.
Mr. Mureșan.
Mulțumesc, domnule președinte. Dear colleagues, for many decades the United States
Thank you, Chair.
important partner, our most important political partner in defending the multilateral world order, our most important economic partner. Together we represent more than 30% of global trade. Our economies represent more than 40% of the global economy. The United States of America have been for many decades our most important partner in security and defense. Together we have launched NATO, which is by far the strongest military alliance in the history, and together we have defended human rights. Together we have defended democracy, we have defended freedom of speech, freedom of press. Because of the importance of the partnership with the United States of America, let me say clearly, we will never turn our back on our American friends, of our American allies. Let us monitor closely what is happening in the United States of America. Let us be in dialogue with this administration. There are opinions reaching from very good to very bad. Let us monitor what happens. Let us see what decisions are being made. Be in dialogue with the new administration, defending the values that we stand for and trying to make sure that we will be stronger on security, on defense, and on the economy as a European Union, also through partnerships with the United States. Thank you very much.
Mulțumim. Urmează Crystal Schaldemose.
Thank you. Crystal Schaldemose has the floor.
I næsten en måned har præsident Trumps interesse i Grønland. Thank you very much. In the last month or so, we have seen increased interest on the part of President Trump in Greenland and its future. This has been on everybody's lips, and the people of Greenland, through their ministers, have said that Greenland is not for sale, and they never will be for sale. This has been said quite unequivocally, and indeed it has been endorsed also by the Minister of State for Denmark, who has subscribed 100% to what's been said by the Danish ministers. Therefore, the situation is quite clear. What has to be decided regarding Denmark will be decided, regarding Greenland will be decided by the people of Greenland. Having said that, of course, we face a new reality in America, but the US is our strongest ally, and we need to keep that in mind. We need to aspire to stronger cooperation. Of course we do. But the situation has shown us quite clearly that Europe has got to be more self-aware and more sure of itself. We have got to stand up for ourselves, both in terms of the economy, the global economy, but also in terms of digital policy and the climate.
Thank you, Mr. Vistisen. Next.
Dear President Trump, listen very carefully. Greenland has been part of the Danish kingdom for 800 years. It's an integrated part of our country. It is not for sale. Let me put it in words you might understand. Mr. Trump, fuck off. Når det er sagt, så må vi sige, at både danske og grønlandske politikere...
Now, after saying that, I must say in Danish, talking about Greenlandic politicians, because often they talk about unrealistic plans. Nobody can think that such a large territory could be defended by the Greenlandic people alone. And they have self-determination already. They can do something, but they don't do it. They have their sovereignty, they have their legal system, and they have healthcare system, yet they constantly talk about self-determination. It's not serious, quite frankly. This leads to unrest. And there's also rhetoric against Denmark, saying it's a colonial power. But this is not true. This is not in line with reality. Look at Denmark. If you look at Greenland, 1/3 of children are abused, there's corruption, and perhaps we should focus on this within the Commonwealth of Denmark.
Is not allowed in this House, and there will be consequences to the message you have used. It is not okay in this House of Democracy. Thank you. Regardless of what we think of Mr. Trump, it is not possible to use such language. Alexander Vondra.
Yes, thank you very much. So we must take the new administration, our key ally, seriously. The executive orders signed, the policy changes announced, they are not mere formalities. They mark the beginning of the new era. I raised these questions during the hearings, and I will raise it again because no clear answer has been provided. What is our plan B to the Green Deal? How does the Commission intend to ensure in the EU, with the stagnating economy, collapsing industry and insufficient defence policy, will not find isolated itself in this rapidly changing world? What measures will the Commission take to avoid the trade wars with the United States? Where is the Council plan to engage with Donald Trump? We are entering an era where the economic might and military power will dictate the terms of the global relevance. Soft power is not enough. Will we rise to the occasion, or we will fade into the irrelevance? This is the question of the day.
Thank you, Mr. Vondra. Urmează Dan Barna.
Mr. Dan Barna on behalf of Renew.
Mulțumesc, domnule președinte.
Thank you, Chair.
Something going around across the pond, and the Uncle Sam caught a cold. Last night, we all witnessed a spectacle of isolationism and outright proclamations of miracles bound to happen. What we didn't hear was a true vision for the future. Other than a flurry of sometimes barbaric executive orders and threats to rewrite geography, like is George Orwell's 1984, there was no mention of the European Union or transatlantic security. There were no logical thoughts about the world economy, not even about the American one. I've said it in the past, with or without Donald Trump in the White House, Europe needs to evolve and develop no matter the context. It's time to face reality. We will not abandon our partnership with the United States, but we will also not forget it's a wide world out there. We will collaborate with other states and regions because this is the time for Europe to lead the free world by example, diplomacy, and the power of our defining values. Thank you.
Mulțumesc.
Thank you. Mrs. Alice Kuhn is next.
Tack, herr talman.
Thank you, President. There's a great deal to be said and there's a great deal to mourn. But one thing is very certain. It is time for the EU to begin to lead globally for our climate, for democracy, for human rights, for LGBTQI people, for women, for investigative journalism, and for the rights of minorities. All of these things now are threatened by Trump's extreme right henchmen in the US, but they're also present here in the EU, the same right-wing extremists that our conservatives stand side by side with and allow to have influence over EU policy. We cannot afford your extramarital affairs with the extreme right. You have the power to determine whether the European Union should be the counterweight that the world needs. Please take that responsibility.
Mulțumesc, doamna Kunke. Urmează...
Thank you, Mrs. Kunke. Next is Mrs. Mesure.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much. The threats by Trump against Canada, Greenland, and more should surely waken us up big time to what his aspirations are. His imperialist aspirations are becoming ever clearer, not least in terms of climate change. We can see the Trumpist approaches, the wish to get Arctic mineral resources, to take over Canada and all the wealth and minerals that they have. He believes that he has credibility, but we have got to stand up and be counted. We have got to make our position clear, both in terms of the economy and defence, because the commercial war which the Americans are going to perpetrate against us will threaten many jobs in Europe in the guise of protectionism. The dark clouds are gathering. There is war in the offing between the major powers, and more we need a non-aligned Europe which is prepared to fight for international law and compliance therewith. Thank you.
I would like to just draw your attention to speak in a normal rhythm and not to try to hurry, because I get signals from the translators. Thank you. Markus Buchheit.
Danke, Herr Vorsitz.
Thank you very much, President. Ladies and gentlemen, here in this discussion, it reminds us of biblical quotations. I hear what the Commission is saying. Well, yes, Trudeau, Olaf Scholz and von der Leyen, their time is coming to an end. And we can see wokeism and gender ideology and climate alarmism have no future whatsoever. And the sun of freedom is shining from Argentina through to Austria and now to us. And there are many new narratives being created. People are saying that Donald Trump is part of an oligarchy in America. But really, you should open your eyes to political realism and say, yes, this is a big change, a big change that can move us towards proper democracy, proper freedom, and we can have hopefully see the sun shine here as well. Open yourselves to this, please.
Thank you. Sebastião Bugalho has the floor.
President, colleagues, perante uma administração.
Facing a US administration that only understands the language of force, Europe must stand firm. The path is clear. We need to strengthen ourselves. The more vigorous our economy, with the capital markets union and banking union concluded, the greater our strength will be at the transatlantic table. The more solid our defence union, with our strategic compass being implemented and our security safeguarded, we will be stronger within the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. The firmer our democracies, with zero tolerance for foreign interference, be that digital or military, the more strength we will have in our negotiations seeking peace. The United States of America will always be at the negotiating table. The question is, what seat and what strength will this union have at that same table? The transatlantic union can be more transactional when it comes to the economy, military, but when it comes to international law and the respect for the results of elections, they cannot be bartered for this union. We must preserve this alliance, and we mustn't forget who is sat in front of us. But above all, we mustn't forget about ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lange. 1 minute and a half.
Herr Minister, lieber Maros, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen.
Commissioner, Minister, colleagues, the cat is out of the bag, and now we have an American first trade policy over the water. The President has written to his ministers and is telling them what the shape of economic relations with other countries will be henceforth. There are many things which elicit great concern in our minds. We're concerned, for example, about potential tariffs, which have been mooted by Trump. There could potentially be tariffs on steel, which we've seen in the past. There could be tariffs elsewhere. Of course, the WTO should review the legality of all this, but again, we've been there before. There are many initiatives which would have huge impacts on our economy because our exports amount to a 200 billion trade surplus for us, and therefore we do need to take care to secure our economic interests. Looking at this paper, I can see implicit attacks against the principles of fair trade, but there's also paragraph 2G, which talks about the intention to negotiate. So the conclusion that I draw from reading this paper is that there is a two-pronged strategy. The dual approach is negotiation where possible to achieve some sort of stable relationship, defend, imposing defence instruments where necessary to defend your legitimate economic position where under threat. This is the basis on which we need to proceed in the forthcoming weeks. Thank you.
Thank Mr. Schaller Baros is next.
Ladies and gentlemen, today's leaders have isolated the European Union. We have a weakening EU economy. Just look at the Draghi report and what that says. The EU is not able to stand up for peace, to stop migration and even supports immigration, and is not giving prospects to European farmers. For around a decade now, in this House, all of the left-wing politicians have been vilifying the 45th and now 47th President of the United States. This is the case of the European Commission as well. Once again, American voters voted for Donald Trump in a democratic election. But you haven't learned anything. You don't want to reduce isolation. No, you want to ignore the will of the people and continue to attack our American friends. But it's time to wake up. Donald Trump is simply putting in practice what he promised. He wants to protect the country's borders. He wants to stop rampant illegal migration. He wants to curb woke ideology, which is poisoning society, and he once again wants to bolster the American economy. let's not isolate ourselves from the new American administration. Let's work together. For them, America is first, but for us, it's our nation states through which Europe can be stronger as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Emmanuel Fracos is next.
Thank you very much, Chair. Americans and Europeans are saying, make America great again, rejecting the woke agenda and international policies. But this was not just about the United States, but it was a universal message, because Donald Trump fought against the elites and put forward the message that we should serve the interests of the people. And his struggle is our struggle. Europe needs leaders that put people first, that work in favor of our culture, and fight against bureaucrats. So we need to draw inspiration from Trump's vision and build a Europe that will be strong and sovereign. It's time for Europe to welcome the time when the voices of nations will be heard loud and clear. Let's make Europe great again. Thank you.
Billy Kelleher has the floor right now.
The Trump presidency will be disruptive and will be unpredictable in the areas of tax, trade and security. So we need to accept that and deal with it. We need to maintain dialogue. There is no point in us being ideologically opposed to the fact that the American people have elected Donald Trump as their president, both on the left and the right. We need to temper our language to ensure that Europe continues to dialogue with its most important strategic partner. European companies provide huge employment opportunities right across Europe, and we have to ensure that we maintain and protect that, so the areas of tax and trade are of significant importance. American troops died on this continent twice over the last 110 years to save ourselves from ourselves, so it is critically important from a security perspective as well. And sometimes on the right I hear people championing Trump. But equally, I'd like them to stand in front of their own citizens and say that in the event of Trump withdrawing from NATO, either directly or funding, taxes in their countries will go up, the threat to their countries will increase. So very clearly, those that do trumpet Trump should also be very conscious of the potential consequences of President Trump if he does renege on his security commitments to date in the areas of NATO, funding directly and also military support.
Thank you. Mr. Marino is next.
Thank you, President. Trump began his mandate reaffirming many of the points he'd made during the election campaign. But he is now, of course, putting them into practice, and they're a threat to our very values to underpin our union. He didn't invite the President of the Commission to the inauguration, for example, which is simply an underlining of how marginal he thinks Europe is on the global stage. He wants to bring an immediate end to the Ukraine war, but in dialogue with Putin, excluding Europe. He's signed executive orders to release from prison all those insurrectionists who ransacked the capital. And he has said that there can only be two genders in America, and henceforth LGBTI people's rights in society as a whole are under threat. He is rolling back provisions on health, and one might hope that the court might be able to impose some constraints on this, but the reality is there for us all to see in plain sight. Democratic values and principles are under major threat, and if we don't act now, then we will simply accept years of irrelevance, and we will be leaving others to write our history and define who we are. Thank you.
Mr.
Saramo has the floor.
Last year was again the hottest on record. Drought, floods and storms killed people both in the US and EU, not to mention poor countries. A true leader would do his best for his own people, nature and humanity. Trump does the opposite. He withdraws from the Paris Climate Agreement. He adds drilling and exports for gas and oil. He threatens to impose tariffs on EU products. He demands that we buy weapons from the US for hundreds of billions, even though the majority of our defense spending already goes to the US. The techno-oligarchs who fund Trump demand that we accept brainwashing on their platforms. The extreme right in this parliament is destroying Europe from within to support Trump, Musk and Putin. We must not surrender. We have to become independent. Let's move away from dirty fuels. Let's stop supporting the US arms industry. And let's take care from our own economy, human rights and democracy.
Next, Soido Alvarez Juan Ignacio.
Gracias, Presidente.
Thank you, President. Donald Trump placed Spain in the group of allies with China and Russia, i.e. one of Washington's rivals. His conclusion might be reasonable if we bear in mind that Sanchez tried to negotiate with China fruitlessly. He has undermined NATO efforts to invest more in defense. The consequence of our international alignment, according to Trump, will be 100% tariffs for Spanish products, which is a true economic disaster. The European Union is trying to avoid this by negotiating with Trump. Unlike Sanchez, who preferred to insult the president of the US, his recklessness will have disastrous consequences for our businesses, our workers, and we will see this soon. The Spanish government must reflect urgently and put aside its ideology and focus on the interests of all Spanish people.
Thank you. Mrs. Aurora Luc is next.
Monsieur le Président,
President, Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen, the Trump system is an extortionist system, more extortionist than transactional. I can do whatever I want, whenever I want, and all that without any guarantee that you'll have any security or defence. We, faced with that in Europe, cannot move to suspicion and despising this system. We need to have a strategy. We need to look at the balance of power. Now, on the strategy, we have to have our own industrial independence. Let's stop drafting poetry because we're going to end up losing. We need to have a European industrial policy with quite clear goals, with a clear timetable according to sections of time and time horizons we're going to cope with. We need to look at clean tech and chemistry, for example. On the balance of power, the Commission has been very slow in reacting to Elon Musk, and that's unacceptable. We cannot see that happen again. This administration is going to move very quickly. It's going to hit hard. It's not going to know any limits. We know the illiberal governments that is now proposing taking 50% of TikTok. But we have to deal with this. We need to deal with it quickly, and we need to conclude with actions or even sanctions. Let's not be scared. Let us use this single market as an arm in our arsenal to help the balance of power. Thinking about the balance of power, let's not be scared. We can't just pursue politics as per usual. The world is changing. We have to act to protect Europeans rather than protecting a world which, unfortunately, doesn't exist anymore. Thank you.
Urmează domnul Hirauta Vidal.
Mr. Girauta Vidal.
Trump inaugura su segundo.
We're seeing Trump entering a second mandate now with the global left saying it's the end of the world. But I don't think those doom and gloom mongers are really credible now because he took a fairly hands-off approach to foreign policy in his previous mandate, and everyone got through it. Trump has said that he'll continue with a peace and non-interference-based policy, and that's a paradigm shift globally. Trump has already achieved this. He achieved it actually before taking office, a ceasefire in
Gaza, and we're now seeing an openness to peace negotiations for Ukraine too. And all of this exposes the left, because they've been putting forward these different arguments, but now we have to decide which direction we want to go in. Are we going to throw away everything that we've had with our previous ally on the other side of the Atlantic and just engage in a sort of self-flagellation, saying how terrible the world is as China and the US go forward? They're major powers, and we need to put the EU on that stage too. Unfortunately, we've been following policies that have made us less competitive and just dragged us downward.
Urmează Richard Coles.
Mr. Coles.
Dear colleagues, the new Trump administration signals a shift in transatlantic relations, but let's be clear, neither Europe nor US can do it alone and expect to retain global strength. If we want to remain relevant, US cannot do it alone and expect to retain global strength. If we want to remain really relevant, we must stand united. Europe needs to finally become, and I mean literally, a strong, loyal and trustworthy ally. We cannot afford internal divisions while our adversaries inflict death by thousands, cuts through disinformation, coercion, hybrid and open hostilities. They thrive on our hesitation and disunity. A strong transatlantic partnership depends not just on the US, but also on Europe stepping up. We must first invest in defence capabilities that deter, not just respond. Second, tackle economic vulnerabilities that adversaries exploit. And last but not least, speak with one voice on strategic threats like Russia and China. It's about our credibility. We must step up and meet the US as equals, because divided we fall.
Urmează Hilde Woutmans.
Ms. Woutmans.
Beste collega's, het gaat... Honourable members, for days and weeks we have discussed Trump. Yesterday, Trump, however, said not a single word about Europe, and that was significant. We know his plans. He looks to protect the US economy, and that will hit our companies hard. And what about European NATO allies? He plans to abandon them. Third point, he will negotiate deals with as many autocrats as possible, starting with Putin, maybe China too, against Europe, undermining Europe's interests. What is our strategy? Well, let me tell you what we need to do. We need to strengthen all our alliances with Democrats. An alliance against bullies. We need a European defence policy together with NATO, if possible, against Trump if need be. We need to be consistent and give our policies teeth. Honourable members, Trump shows real passion for America. We need to show the same passion for Europe. Thank you.
Urmează Anna Cavazzini.
Now, Anna Cavazzini.
Ja, liebe Kollegen.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, our answer to Trump's attacks on democracy and the free world order, make America great again, they have to be Europe united. A strong, unified Europe, Europe united. But it can't just be empty words. So what does that actually mean? Well, I think we need more political commitment, for example, from a German Chancellor, and a preparedness to stump up more finances for the EU to make it more competitive and able to act. Also, we should give no quarter on big tech, because here Trump, together with his mates, Musk and Zuckerberg, will not give any quarter on their side. The Digital Services Act gives us tools. We should use those so that democracy, freedom of opinion and elections can remain free. Our European rules cannot be some sort of negotiating fodder for a deal between climate laws or other aspects. And just one comment to our EPP colleagues. I think the EPP need to be extremely cautious with their calls for opening legislation, because otherwise you might be paving the way for Trump. Thank you.
Dankeschön. Urmează domnul Nicolas Farantouris.
Mr. Nicolas Farantouris.
From the room.
President, dear colleagues, dear Commissioner Šefčovič, I'm going to talk about the financial dimension of this new relationship between ourselves and the US, because I feel that that's the most important part. The global trade architecture, as it was set out post-World War II, is now changing, but it's not starting to change now. It's been changing since the Obama government, because since that time, I believe that the US government started withdrawing their interest from the WTO and started discussing things at a regional level. So the European answer needs to be more regional conversations and more agreements. And of course, the external relationship of the European Union should be directly connected to our trade relations, now and without any further delay.
Mr. Alton.
Dear President, Commissioner, many of us watched yesterday's commencement speech with keen interest. President Trump's primary focus was evident, as much as it is domestic. His policies have brought external ramifications from tariffs to Paris Treaty. He will significantly increase US defence spending and promote US exceptionalism without hesitance. He promised American revival and primacy. His method echoes previous US presidents. If you have a big enough stick, you will be heard even when you speak softly. Unfortunately, Europe lacks such power. Our defence spending still lacks and is insufficiently used. Aid for Ukraine has to continue even when the US withdraws from it for the next 3 months, if necessary, alone. Without that strength, our voices go unheard, no matter how loudly we yell. The rest of the world only yawns. Now we need to alter our approach radically. Our policies need to prioritise European geostrategic interests.
Mohamed
Shaheen.
Thank you, Chair. We don't correct for the speed limit of the speed differences in languages. Maybe we should, but I will speak Dutch. America
is more than Trump, whether you believe it or not. When in the past he left the Paris Agreement, some companies decided to press ahead regardless. We have a strong relationship with the US and we must continue to maintain that relationship. We need to look at Europe's interests, not just the interests of Trump and his tech associates. We know that our companies continue to do business with the US. We should fight for that. We know that there is talk of tariffs that would lead to an increase in inflation. We need to try to defend ourselves, be less reliant. Trump's policy is America first, but that should not mean that the rest of us suffer.
Dank u wel, collega. Urmează Gerolf Annemans.
Gerolf Annemans next.
Voorzitter, ik zou wensen.
President, I would like to think that all of the panicking left liberal, globalist and multilateralist colleagues could be put at ease. Because with Trump's investiture, there's not going to be an end to democracy. On the contrary, it's going to be a celebration, even a festival of democracy. But where there is a problem is the reputation of the European Union in today's Washington. My understanding is that the EU is viewed by those in power in the US as a centralised, led, planned economy with far too many rules, far too much rigidity, too little margin for deal-making and negotiating. And then on top of everything else, there's a huge compulsive leftist tendency to restrict the freedom of expression. Today's European Union is at odds with the new era that began yesterday on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean, a new era in which the multilateral EU will largely constitute a handicap for the high-performing member states in Europe. We patriots in Europe want to join this new era, a new patriotic time when we hope in Europe, member state by member state, election by election, that new time will also arrive. Yesterday is a day of hope.
Urmează Aurelius Veriga.
Aurelius Veriga.
Dear colleagues, long-standing self-deception that we will regulate size of chicken cages and America will take care of our security is over. During his first term, Trump clearly stated that other NATO members must also invest in their defense. Then he was criticized. Now we have painfully realized that we do not have the resources even to help Ukraine to win a war. And if even the war in Ukraine did not make some countries think about investing in defense, maybe Trump will. Like a Trump in the EU, we see that the ideology-based green policy harmed the competitiveness of EU industry, and CO2 emissions in the world even increased. Perhaps now we will understand that at a time when floods and fires are already happening, we need to stop living in fantasies and start caring about adaptation and survival. I hope we will also return to common sense when we talk about the end of the gender ideology and cancel culture. As Europe freezes in demographic winter, waking up to biological reality and ending the brainwashing of our children could be a good start. Thank you.
Thank you. Urmează din partea Renew, doamna Marie-Pierre Vedren.
Marie-Pierre Vedren is next.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, President, Commissioner, Minister. Yesterday, the US saw Donald Trump take office. It appeared to be a historical accident 8 years ago, but now we can see that the will of a people is changing the world with this hegemony and this worldview. We need to look at the idea that submission offers protection. Waiting is the best defense. We're not going to get anything on a plate from Trump. In political, financial, commercial, diplomatic terms, we're going to see a strong policy from Trump. We will need courage and determination to defend our ambitions and interests. In trade, territorial issues, we need one voice for the EU. An aggressive US administration will give us no choice. The time has definitively come for us to decide what our ambitions are, our voices are, our methods are. We need to step forth for a European project with total mobilization and efficacy.
Domnul Damian Böselager.
Damian Böselager.
I'm always amazed by the far right of this House. There was a mentioning of the new sun of democracy rising across the ocean, and I was wondering that maybe some of the colleagues got a bit too much sun already when I look at what they're saying. They're saying it's amazing that we have this expansionist person now there, but then I hear a Danish far-right guy saying, yeah, but maybe don't take Greenland, you know, that's not so good. So when it goes against your own interest, then suddenly you realize that maybe if there's an expansionist on the other side, it's not so good to be a patriot and in favor of that. There are three main implications of Trump taking power. The first one is about economy, the second one is about security, and the third one is about democracy. When it comes to economy, we need to work closer together. We need to go into free trade agreements, to diversify trade. We need to really unleash innovation in Europe and build the interior market. When it comes to security, we need to understand that 17 different tank systems for the same category in Europe doesn't make sense. We need to be able to support Ukraine and defend ourselves. And when it comes to democracy, I can only ask all citizens of the European Union to get active in politics now, because we really need you in the center and not in these false patriotic parties. Thank you.
Thank you. Urmează domnul Rudy Kennes.
Mr. Rudy Kennes. President, ladies and gentlemen, Donald Trump once said that tariffs was the most beautiful word in the dictionary. And I assume he's going to continue this policy with tariffs against Canada, Mexico, and China. He says that it's making America stronger, but let's be honest, it's just an attack on working people around the world, because who's paying the cost here? Not the billionaires in his cabinet, but the usual man on the street, the woman on the street, with higher prices and less security. There's an aggressive attack from Trump, and he's trying to drag the rest of the world into his Cold War. It's not going to affect goods from Canada and China, but also from Europe as well. The whole future, I think, is at stake. It's not economic protection. These are the last gasps of a system that is collapsing, capitalism. But the future is in our hands, luckily. We have a civilized world. We want to have fair trade. We want to have a socialist perspective. So let's not follow Trump, not give in to his blackmail. Let us stand resolute and say, no way, we won't pay.
Dank u wel. Urmează Francisco
José Milan Mons, the next speaker.
The US is a key player in the US global order and a key EU ally. We have a strong trade relationship, equally strong relationship on security and defence. That is vital. We must preserve that at a time of growing conflict and war in Ukraine. The European Union needs to nurture a strong relationship with the US administration, regardless of its political hue. We need a good trade and energy relationship. A trade war will not be in the interests of anyone, either side of the Atlantic. There is more that unites us than divides us from the US. We need a constructive approach. We should not allow ourselves in Europe to be divided. We need to stand united, defend our interests and principles in this new era. Thank you.
Gracias. Urmează domnul Agius.
Mr. Agius Saliba.
Today marks the first day of Trump's second presidency. While he promises a golden age for the United States, he plans on doing so by putting America first above everything, including his European allies and our rights. His zero-sum reasoning about deals is about eating or being eaten. He prioritizes the show of force above cooperation across the Atlantic. The Commission needs to be prepared for this and to demonstrate the EU's economic strength as the largest economic market in the world. Even the US big tech companies and their billionaire owners need access to our market to make money. But this cannot be done at the cost of our citizens and the integrity of our democracy. We cannot squander the EU's reputation as a global force and a frontrunner in regulating tech. The rules of the DSA and other measures are not bargaining chips, nor are the investigations into X, Meta, Apple, or other tech giants. The Commission needs to show strength and to resist the mounting pressure to give in to the interest of the tech oligarchs. We either fight or we fold. And as socialists and democrats, we have made our choice. Thank you.
Mulțumesc. Urmează domnul Pierre Romain Tione.
Now Pierre Romain Tione.
Sommes-nous prêts à parler le langage?
Are we ready to speak the language of force? Are we willing to go for the grammar of power rather than diplomacy? These are the questions the new US administration is putting to us, because Trump is going to put global pressure on us. America is going to move away from multilateralism and overturn the liberal order which has prevailed up until now. So the EU will have to look at the world as it is, the world as it never should have been, according to Europe. There will be a shock of identity and representation. But some Europeans are just sort of frozen in place. in denial. Over 2,000 years ago, Thucydides referred to the inhabitants of Melos not accepting their invasion. They were eventually vanquished, but they defended a certain idea of freedom. And now we're seeing way more than the modest citizens of Melos being at the stake. Stefan Sejourné, Ursula von der Leyen, Christine Lagarde, the apostles of federal Europe, are already laying themselves down, prostrate before Trump. We need more for defence, energy, and for trade. We cannot just give in. So let us use this historical opportunity to turn the page on history and show that we're not just client states with a central metropole. Let us return to the truths of Greece and the free cities united amongst themselves before our division leads to our annihilation by an outside party.
Christopher Storm.
Thank you. I'm quite convinced it doesn't really matter who's the president in the US. If you look at how important they are as a partner for Europe, whether it's a Republican or Democratic president, the US will still be our absolutely most important partner when we talk about trade and security. So it's our task in Europe to always be able to cooperate with the reigning president and the institutions they are. When Trump was president the last time, he pushed to make sure that we fulfilled the criteria to be part of the NATO alliance. Now he's back in the Oval Office, and he wants to promote growth in the American economy. So we will have to follow suit in Europe. We need to look at how we control or direct the economy in our part of the world. That requires deregulation. If we don't follow suit when the Americans move, we will lose out here in Europe. Thank you.
Urmează doamna Karin Karlsbro.
Ms. Karin Karlsbro.
President, Council, Commission, colleagues. The United States has a new president. Exactly what that means for us remains an open question. The strong link across the Atlantic is as important today as it was the day before yesterday. But President Trump is putting our relationship at risk. Today, Europe must stand united behind our commitments to the climate as the US once again withdraws from the Paris Agreement. Today, Europe must stand with Ukraine as the US falters. This is the best investment we can make for our common security. Regardless of what President Trump does, we will fight for free trade, for growing economies. Donald Trump is the president, the new president of America, not the world. Thank you.
Mulțumesc. Urmează domnul Thomas Weitz.
Thomas Weitz is next.
Thank you, President, Commissioner. Yesterday made it clear that when it comes to security and trade, we cannot rely on the US as a partner and friend. The US will adopt politics for the super wealthy. Trump and Musk will look to enrich themselves further. Trump will reach out to autocrats, Xi Jinping and Putin. Their shared interest will be to undermine, weaken the EU and divide the EU, get rid of independent judiciary. They support the far right, the populist right, Orban, Meloni, and the Austrian mini-Trump, Herbert Kickl. The European People's Party is also helping the far right to gain power. That runs counter to the EU's principles and democratic policy. Mull over your course of action. Rejoin European democracy. Don't help these people. It will damage the EU, hurt our citizens and undermine our values. Please, a U-turn.
Domnul Weitz. There is a blue card from Mr. Sander Smith from EPP. Do you accept?
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to ask Mr. Weitz whether he distances himself from the extreme utterances made this morning and allegations about Musk being a Nazi and using a Nazi salute, because that's not helping the US-EU alliance either. And that does not help to bring down the tone of the voice and of the tone of the debate. So how does Mr. Weitz see this? Because he's making new allegations against many oligarchs, against political groups, but shouldn't we try to avoid such extreme allegations, which are also fake news, in fact? The ADL just this morning refuted these claims.
I don't know what Mr. Musk meant with his move, but to me as an Austrian, it looked like a Hitler salute. And to many citizens, it looked like a Hitler salute. I don't know what he meant with it, and I cannot judge this. But what I see is that terms that were used in Nazi Germany and Nazi Austria are getting normalized. Our candidate for the extreme right is calling himself Volkskanzler. That's how Adolf Hitler was naming himself before he called himself a Führer. So a certain normalization of terms that we know from this time is unfortunately something I am watching. And I really seriously think that the pro-democratic parties should stick together beyond different opinions, beyond different political affiliations, but to the core of European unity, of European togetherness, and for our democratic principles. Thank you.
Mr. Weitz, if you'll accept another blue card from Mr. Baros Schaller de la Patriots for Europe. Acceptați? Acceptați?
Gerne fragen, wann haben Sie vergessen, was Demokratie bedeutet?
Have you forgotten what democracy means? Donald Trump won democratic elections in the US. Mr. Kickle won democratic elections in Austria. Hopefully, we'll see a strong Austrian government. You're not a Democrat. You are insulting voters and democracy, democratic elections. You should be ashamed of yourself. I don't believe you heard what I said. I talked about how dangerous it is to give them power, how that endangers our democracy. Look at Hungary, how media freedom is restricted, freedom of opinion, independent judiciary. Look at the education system, hospitals, the economy, on its knees. That is where we're heading if Orban and his friends gain power. I don't want that.
Thank you very much. Please don't forget that blue cards are intended to put questions rather than give personal comments. Mr. Barena Asa.
Thank you, President. Colleagues, I'd like to join these words of concern at this autocratic, conservative turn that the US has taken now. For ordinary people in Europe and for European values, this is worrying. It's not so much about who's in the White House. It can have important consequences, but both on the Republican and Democrat side, this idea that the US should be paramount, the US should run the world and do whatever it likes around the world and have a military presence defending interests which are not European interests, at least, is still the same tune. So we've got a regional power with global ambitions. That's the issue, and that applies to politics worldwide, and it has an impact on the EU too. So there's a huge contradiction here. You say, we want strategic autonomy for the EU, but we're going to be in NATO. We're going to be in an alliance which is basically US foreign policy led. That's not ours, and it cannot be ours, our vision, our foreign policy, because we don't have any impact on that global order in that way. We need to think about European sovereignty and our geopolitical position as something rather more than simply bending the knee to US foreign policy and colonialism.
Mr. Steer.
Vice President, the second Trump term wants to finish the deglobalization process, which commenced during the first term of Donald Trump and which continued throughout the Biden administration. This means that the EU has to adapt to new circumstances. Of course, we will keep the alliance with the US within NATO, but we must develop our own military capacities. Secondly, we must adapt our commercial and energy policy to new foreign policy circumstances. Without the US, we cannot save the objectives under the Paris Agreement, but Europe has and must save its economy. Secondly, Europe must not miss the opportunity for bilateral agreements as the ones with Mexico and Mercosur, which must be ratified in the shortest time possible. Instead of blaming Trump for all our problems, we must do what we can and things that are good and important for Europe. Thank you.
Urmează doamna Hanna.
Thank you. Ms. Yalul Muro.
Buenas tardes.
Thank you. Donald Trump's investiture marks a turning point in international instability. We will see extreme migratory policies and an impact on global security. We will see strategies that interfere in European politics, for example. We should use the tools available to us to strengthen our strategic autonomy within the European Union. We need to diversify our trade relations and nurture our ties with other democratic allies. We need to protect our interests and we need to stand united, have a clear vision in our approach to the US. We need to stand united within the European Union. Thank you.
Și urmează doamna Isabela Tovalieri.
Thank you, Ms. Tovalieri.
Fine dell'ambientalismo estremo.
An end to extreme environmentalism, send back illegal immigrants and stop funding e-vehicles, defend your borders, do away with woke ideology, peace in Ukraine and the Middle East. These are the key phrases that Trump was using yesterday. This is common sense. Any European would like to hear these words on this side of the Atlantic too. But what is the EU doing? The exact opposite. Still talking about the Green Deal, doing away with cars. Who cares about the jobs? An immigration plan that won't even get rid of immigrants who've committed crimes, continuing support for a woke ideology which is increasingly crazy and divorced from reality. Commissioners and bureaucrats should listen to what President Trump has said, because this is a change. This wind of change is a strong one, and you won't be able to stop it. We should also learn a lesson from Trump and make Europe great again.
Tovalieri, do you accept a blue card from Mr. Gonsalves? No. Sorry. Eriksson Dick.
The American people have elected to take a new political path. We're going to see positive consequences for us in Europe as well. Europe finally is going to be forced to strengthen its competitiveness. The green utopia is going to have to be reviewed. We are looking forward to an important sobering up. Mr. Trump is going to get rid of the dead wood. He's going to make sure that the administration works better. He's going to look further over the borders. We need to see this in Europe, a less amount of woke and gender confusion. Let us introduce an era of common sense together with the United States. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cotrim de Figueiredo.
Thank you, President, Commissioner Šefčovič, President of Council. We need to wake up in the EU. For decades, we've had alarm signals. The Draghi letter reports, what we're hearing now from Trump is also a wake-up call. It's not about values, what Trump is saying. It's about a power grab. We need to stand up for our own interests, the economy and defence. The question is how. We need a strategic focus. We cannot waste any more time that only plays into the hands of the far left and far right. We need to take risks. We can't keep everyone happy all of the time, but we don't have any more time to waste. We need to wake up, be autonomous in terms of defence. We need to move further with single markets and to defend free trade. We need to simplify, simplify, simplify in terms of the way in which the single market works, and Commission, Council, Parliament can work together in times of crisis. Trump is the biggest crisis of all. So let us all move together for freedom. Europe needs to wake up, and wake up now.
There is a blue card. Mr. Kotrim, there's a blue card from... Yes. You accept, yes. Go ahead, Mr. Oliveira.
Obrigado, Presidente.
Thank you, President. Mr. Coutrinho de Figueiredo, you were saying that the EU needs to distance itself from the Trump administration, and your question was how exactly we can do it. A priority would be to raise wages and deal with the poorest in society. We also need to ensure that we're supporting production sectors that are vital to the national economies. How do you distance yourself from Trump if you're actually going for militarism? Military solution. No, we need investment in public services, accessible housing. If you don't do that, then it's just a rhetorical distancing from Trump. It's not actually a political distancing from Trump, and you're still in exactly the same pocket of political and economic interest. Mr. Oliveira, I think there are two things which undermine your argument here. Firstly, you didn't really listen to what I said. And secondly, it's not about being distant from the US, it's about being autonomous. For a long time, we haven't been sufficiently autonomous in terms of our defence and our economy. And if you look at the bigger picture of what is happening around the world, you need to look at what the US is doing, but you also need to look at what what autocrats are doing around the world and stand up for what we should do as Europeans. And that in itself is no contradiction.
Thank you. Ms. Lexman.
Ďakujem za slovo, pán komisár.
Thank you. Commissioner, in the current complex global backdrop, Donald Trump's inauguration gives us a fresh opportunity to pursue principled solutions, protect our economic and security interests. The US is our closest ally. It is down to us to ensure that that continues to be the case. We have long neglected the transatlantic relationship, even though reality has shown us for quite some time how important it is to disengage from unreliable third countries such as China or Russia. Instead of looking for differences and criticizing the US, we need to face facts and realize who our real democratic partners are. The transatlantic relationship must be nurtured as a pillar to defend democracy, collective security, freedom of speech, conscience and religion. I firmly believe that despite some of President Trump's statements, we can find common ground on issues such as security.
Stefan Bonaccini.
The speech that Mr. Trump gave at his investiture confirms what we feared about what he said he would do about NATO, about having customs duties on the rest of the world, pushing the rest of the world to the edge of crisis. The United States has always been a strategic partner. We should carry on to act without any feeling of inferiority and should look at reciprocal measures. We should have issues that are supported in terms of mutual trade. If we're attacked on trade, we should defend ourselves. we need to make sure that, faced with the wake-up call of Trump, we need to have an increase in quality in the way we do things. It's only by standing shoulder to shoulder in Europe in social economic terms and on common defence and rapidity of decision-making, including looking at how vetoes can be used, that's the only way we can meet President Trump.
Thank you. Mr. Nikolic. Did you listen to Donald Trump? He said, we will reduce your taxes, end inflation, raise salaries, end illegal immigration. There will be tariffs. This was a pragmatic, enthusiastic show of support for national preference. He has won over even opponents such as Zuckerberg. He will make an impact on people's lives. The US looks forward to a new golden age. We're struggling to survive. The European Union needs to focus on decimated purchasing power. There's no real vision for Europe. No light at the end of the tunnel. No reindustrialisation. The European Union is favouring the Green Deal and is going for censorship through the DSA, no IRA. We've not seen jobs created. You have suicidal policies. Is the US really back? Well, one thing we can be sure about is that we are experiencing a European nightmare and we need to wake up. Thank you, Mr. Ozdoba.
Będę mówić po polsku, I speak Polish. Aby mieć dobre relacje, należy przede wszystkim się szanować.
In order to have a good relationship, you need mutual respect. How can you describe a situation where the main politicians on the European side are attacking Donald Trump? The two Donalds don't seem to be seeing eye to eye in terms of the right way forward. The former EPP president is unhappy that democracy appears to have had its say. If the US is one boat and the EU is another, we've got a strong captain in the US, we've got Trump who wants to move forward, new industry and so on, but what about the European vessel? Who's the actual captain? Everybody's looking in different directions, haven't got a direction at all, thanks to the EPP. And we also need to look at the way in which the European Parliament relates to the US. If within a given group you can see people like Michał Szczerba saying that Trump should be in the bin, that's not good for a relationship either, is it? Mr. Szczerba should be expelled from that group.
Ms. Strack-Zimmerman.
President, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Trump is back, and the one thing you can rely on is that he sticks to his guns, his America First program. He is going to push us for 48 months, and we shouldn't sweat the big stuff here. We should see it as an opportunity to focus on our European strengths, and that starts with assuming responsibility for our own security. In financial terms and resource terms, we need to prepare ourselves. This is an opportunity. We are a fantastic continent. We are responsible for 450 million people, and hence we need more economic dynamics. We need to sort out migration. We need to have pragmatic environmental policies, implement those. Yes, we need to look at authoritarian and autocratic regimes, and we need to stand up to them. We need to continue to work with the US in a pragmatic fashion, but let us not talk ourselves down, because if you talk yourself down, you will be down. It's high time, ladies and gentlemen, to show our strengths. It is high time that we do this together. It's high time we see this as an obligation rather than a choice. Thank you.
Will you accept a blue card from Mr. Siegbert Dröse?
Thank you, President. Thank you for accepting my question. I listened carefully to what you had to say. You were associated with saying that the new US President, Donald Trump, is not fully compos mentis. Do you stick to that?
Well, it's a very interesting question. I'm not one of Trump's greatest fans, but I see reality. He has been elected by the Americans. We'll work together with him. But we shouldn't give up our consciousness about this. We shouldn't allow ourselves to be pushed around every day. And if you watch the election, the things that you might have liked, the way that he dealt with minorities, with women's rights, then I can only be surprised. He was accusing people of eating pets. I mean, calling somebody a sandwich short of a picnic is harmless. But let us realize that we need to make sure that we put our ducks in a row and make sure that we do that now. We should have done it earlier.
Doamna Strack, Mrs. Strack, will you accept another blue card from Mrs. Shoshwaka from non-inscrit? She's up there. You say yes? You accept? Okay, good.
Vă mulțumesc, domnule președinte.
Thank you, President. As a lawyer, I feel obliged to ask the following question. Do you have any studies or qualifications which allow you to express that view?
Bun, vă mulțumesc. În calitate de avocat, aș dori să...
As a lawyer, my question is, do you have any qualifications that will allow you to make such claims about somebody not being fully compos mentis? What is your scientific justification for making such a claim? Do you not feel that censorship should in fact be applied to those who point the finger and make claims without any justification, people who descend to the level of insult against people who are doing no more than defending the interests of their own people?
Well, unacceptable is what Donald Trump has said, and I can tell you that I'm happy that you're not my lawyer, because then I'd be in real trouble. Freedom of opinion, in whichever way you turn it, means that you can say your opinion, and that's what I said, and I stand by it. So now we'll see what reality will bring us. We'll have to deal with Donald Trump, and I refer to our European abilities and competences. And I hope in this part of the chamber, at least, there are Democrats who are going to be working together, and you should note that that's the case and not try and divert the topic.
Doamna Teodorescu Move, Alice.
Tack, talman.
Thank you, President. The US has been, and in the future will continue to be, an important ally and trade partner for Europe. And that's why it's incredibly important that we maintain good relations, with the point of departure being our common interests, not least at a time when the powers of the axis of evil are trying to divide us. From a geopolitical perspective, it's been described, and rightly so, that this is the most serious case since period of time since the Second World War. Europe needs to understand that a durable relation cannot be based solely on one part's goodwill. The American administration is not wrong when it says that Europe has been free riding for far too long. Now, what does this actually mean? Well, it means that our most important investment in the transatlantic relationship is an investment in ourselves. We have to tear down red tape for European industry at the same time as we build up our military defence. And for those of us who believe in free trade, the lesson here is that we need to open more doors to increase trade with more strategic partners. It's only through having reduced vulnerability and a stronger economy that Europe will be able to be a stronger ally with the US and defend the rules-based world order at the same time as having better preconditions to deal with the challenges of the world around us.
Thank you, and thank you to Ms. Temido for agreeing to switch with Mr. Lopez. Thank you, President. Donald Trump has returned to the White House. That will not endanger historic ties. We should be firm and calm in our response. what we see is a collapse in the global consensus, the institutions that have guided the world since the 40s. Rule of law seems to be replaced by force and strength. The European Union should defend its interests wherever necessary. We need to take charge of our own destiny, take action on our own security. That means upping spending on defence. We also need to take charge of our economy, industry, single market, and we must defend our democracies against foreign interference by tech oligarchs. And we need to act now, stand united and show strength.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Valli.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, President. Donald Trump is the 47th President of the US. His program is clear. He will work for the Americans, only for the Americans, America first. He has done so much in one day only. What has France done? Well, we need to be clear that we in the Patriots are proud of being French and proud of our role and our continent.
Dans leur port d'origine,
we want to see people eat French food, French companies given priority. Votes should be respected. So before preaching to Elon Musk about freedom of expression, how about breaking the cordon sanitaire, which is anti-democratic? No one in my group is sick, but your approach to democracy is sick. Patriotism, you think, rhymes with racism, but we believe that patriotism is deeply European. We have nothing to fear from the US. We want to adopt the same approach for France. Thank you. Please do not speak too quickly, because if you do so, part of your message will be lost through interpretation if you speak too quickly. Mr. Becker.
Thank you, President, Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen. In the first speech from Mr. Trump as the 47th President, Europe wasn't mentioned. It wasn't worth of a mention. Maybe that's good news. Maybe that means Europe's not a target. But it could be bad news if he couldn't even be bothered to speak the word Europe. So we're seeing what Mr. Trump is going to do. He broke more than half of his electoral promises, and so what can we expect? Well, we'll have to hope for the best, but be prepared for the worst. And so I think we need to speak with one voice. Trump is already trying to divide Europe. That's not something we should enter into, and that will be dependent on us here. Thirdly, we have to assume our own responsibility for our own safety and security. Donald Tusk is coming here tomorrow. The start of the Polish presidency is talking about security Europe, so we have to do that. And then we need to stop being so economically naive. Let's not be a plaything of a trade war between the US and China. It's up to us to exude unity. Thank you.
Will you accept the blue card from Mr. Grajulis from the ESN? Do you accept?
Mr. Speaker, I always ask a question to the ruling majority. You want good relations with the US. Why haven't the European Parliament congratulated the elect President Trump? Is this a sign of good relations? Don't you think that he was elected illegally, like the candidates in Romania? Is it democracy? Is it the case that democracy is only when you want it, and when somebody else is elected, then there are no signs of democracy?
Well, I don't think anybody here would deny the fact that Mr. Trump was elected properly, so we have to deal with him. But the way that we deal with him is up to us. And so let us prepare ourselves. Let's not be intimidated. Let us prepare ourselves. And that means more Europe and a stronger Europe. And that runs counter to what your group has been talking about. A stronger Europe is a better Europe, is a safer Europe for our welfare and for our citizens.
Thank you. Ms. Marta Temido. And thank you again for switching.
President, Commissioner, Minister, Trump's entry into the White House, his inaugural speech and the first executive orders already show what we can expect. Trump's America First shows us the choice for transatlantic cooperation with the EU rendered more fragile in areas such as defence, trade or climate policy. And it's not only about individual rights being disrespected when he talks about a colourblind society, but also an abandonment of recognition of diversity and multiculturalism. And there's also an abandonment of multilateralism. Trump said the best war is one in which the US doesn't get involved. This raises questions about foreign policy and global security positioning. We fully respect the democratic choice of American citizens and want the US to remain a partner for the European Union, but not at any price. We cannot allow interests to take precedence over our own values, particularly when we're looking at the risk of interference by tech giants in our liberal democracies. The EU and we in this House are required to do more than manage silence and seek accommodation. We need to invest in our strategic autonomy, and we also need to be aware and stand up for our own values.
Mr. Mido, do you accept a blue card from João Oliveira? You accept? Okay.
Obrigado, President.
Thank you, President. Ms. Temido, you referred to 2 points, security and defence and international relations. One of Trump's first decisions was for the US to leave the WHO. I'm sure you would agree with me that that is a bad decision because there are global health issues that require global action such as that which can be achieved through the WHO. Secondly, what is your opinion as to what the EU should do? Do we follow the arms race, militaristic approach of Trump and NATO, or do we move away from militarization and help our people step back from the brink of disaster? Thank you for the question. 2 very relevant points. Firstly, China has given a response to the US withdrawal from the WHO, and that is an example to this House. China stepped up and put its money where its mouth is in terms of providing a financial contribution. That's what the EU should do too. In terms of defending peace, sometimes defending peace requires weapons too.
Urmează domnul Lucas Furlas.
Thank you. Mr. Furlas.
Thank you. This is the time to decide and define what our common future is in Europe, because developments show that we need to re-guide our geopolitical position. The new Trump government showcases this need, which means to re-guide our relationship with our biggest strategic partner. We have common values, we have common history, but sometimes, even allies can compete. And we need to defend our interests and to enhance our security and defense. Our relationship has to be based on mutual respect and equality. So Europe must be competitive, strong and ready to face any challenge, and that could include competitivity, energy, trade. Being together needs to be put in practice because that's the only way to achieve our objectives. But being together means mutual respect. Thank you.
Muchas gracias. Tiene la palabra.
Thank you very much. Mr. Shida, 1 minute.
Liebe Kolleginnen und
Honourable members, Donald Trump is back. Unlike last time round, he arrives prepared, has dangerous new friends, tech oligarchs dancing to his tune and doing business and exploiting workers. This will be a blow for the US and the world at large, and we in the EU must act as a counterweight. We need to ensure social cohesion in Europe. We've had a foretaste of the next 4 years over the past week. Look at the expansionist tendencies, threats targeting Greenland, Panama, Canada. Ursula von der Leyen says that we'll be pragmatic, wait and see. Well, that's all well and good, but we cannot fail to comment on the crazy statements of Donald Trump. The Commission has been very silent in the past week, and that is very telling.
Thank you. Mr. Pascual de la Parte, 1 minute.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, President. Donald Trump is back in the White House. We have to put forward a positive agenda for dialogue and negotiation. We also have to stand up for our convictions and values. We need to be smart and turn challenges into opportunities for the EU. We need to look at the impact of Trump on the economy, a cut in corporation tax below a 10% level could suck in investment and European companies into the US. That deficit will mean he's going to be increasing tariffs. So it's not so much a geopolitical weapon as a way of making him manage the books. And some people are saying that there's an acceleration of history here, but what Europe really needs to do is stand up for its convictions and put that into practice in the global order. We shouldn't just be rule takers. We should show unity and strength and not let the US divide us, not have bilateral relations, stand together as the EU as a fundamental player for peace and stability. Thank you. Mr. O'Riordan, 1 minute.
Yesterday, we witnessed the inauguration of a man whose ideology embodies everything the EU was founded to reject. The EU cannot just stand for our values when it is easy. It matters most when it comes at a cost. And standing up to Trump will come with a cost, but is much less than the cost of letting this poison win. And I am done with the niceties from EU leaders that Trump, while his tech bro buddies call for our laws to be undermined. I am done with the Taoiseach of Ireland, with our historic understanding of immigration and oppression, promoting Trump's golf links in County Clare in response to his inauguration. And I am done with the so-called strong men who, if they had to live for one day in the shoes of an immigrant, a woman or a transgender person, would quiver with fear. Anyone who believes in the founding principles of the EU should be appalled by what we witnessed yesterday. I am appalled, so I resist, and Europe must resist, because our history demands it.
Muchas gracias. Tiene la palabra la señora.
Thank you. Ms. Lagos, 1 minute.
Thank you. Our relationship with the US is a century-long partnership. Together we are bulwarks of the democratic world, and we have to face similar challenges. The recipe for Trump for the future is blunt, but responds to the problems. The world is changing. Well, the new US administration wants to have a global leadership. In Europe, there are voices like in Hungary, in the government of Hungary, which talk about the end of Western democracies. This is a time for soul-searching and to renew our democratic institutions. The EU and the US should strengthen their relationship in cybersecurity, in joint defense policy developments and new technologies. We have joint interests. The EU defense capacities and independent European defense industry is a win-win for both continents. We can together provide affordable energy for European citizens. A transatlantic relationship, we should put the emphasis on collaboration in terms of the economy and not on trade war, which would only strengthen our rivals. The Americans can have the power to redefine themselves. And this is true for transatlantic relationships in Europe. The challenges should be treated in such a way that they could provide benefits for both the US and Europe.
Tiene la palabra la señora.
Thank you. Ms. Insia, 1 minute.
A group of powerful men, tech billionaires, gather in capital, taking prime seats behind the president and his family during the inauguration of the 47th president of the USA. No, it's not a scene taken from House of Cards. This is America 2025. Withdrawal from Paris Climate Accord, implementation of protectionist policies that restricts international trade, disengagement from international organizations. We have also since long been aware of that women's rights, LGBTQI rights, workers' rights will be jeopardized and ordinary working people will suffer while tech billionaires like Musk, Zuckerberg, Bezos and Pisai will face lower, if not zero, taxes. With Trump now sworn in as president, it is evident that this administration adopts a vastly different stance on international cooperation than its predecessor. Our most pressing task is to unite and strengthen the European Union while maintaining strong partnership with like-minded globally. And of course, it also includes the US, as for example, the Democrats. Trump was indeed democratically elected, but acts like an autocrat.
Muchas gracias. Ahora es la palabra.
Thank you very much. Ms. Terlak, 1 minute.
De komst van Trump.
The arrival of Trump has given rise to a discussion about how we need to deal with America. Following the inauguration, the first steps have been taken. The first decrees have been signed by Mr. Trump, like leaving the climate agreement, leaving the WHO, and worsening trade relations with the EU. Now, I'm extremely worried about these developments. However, at the same time, we have to deal with this, and it's incredibly important for Europe to stay in good relations with the US. And these are points of discussion that should not be left off to the agenda. America is our most important ally and will remain so. At the same time, the new Trump government is making the EU a target, and I expect unity from our leaders and that they stand by our rules, our democracy.
Muchas gracias. Ahora es el turno.
Thank you. Mr. Pikula, 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. President. Unfortunately, all the worrying expectations were confirmed during yesterday's inauguration day. The United States stepped into the new era of transactional politics, where merits, facts and values mean little and international law is not a standard. And it's all wisely masked under many labels to gain larger public support. After the super election of 2024, we have entered the super uncertain 2025, and good part of the uncertainty comes from the direction of the Trump new term. The most important question is, where does this leave the European Union? One of our members is being directly threatened. A high-level member of the new administration is directly interfering in our national electoral process while repeating, let's be polite, disputable salutes. So far, our response is brief, hopeful, and wait to see what will happen, but is it realistic? Our priority must be to protect our values, achievements, and security internally through long-delayed, inclusive, and transparent reforms. Thank you.
Muchas gracias. Ahora es el turno.
Thank you. Mr. Vázquez, 1 minute.
Gracias, presidente.
Thank you, President. This strong transatlantic bond between the EU and the US, rule of law, democracy, doesn't entirely depend on the occupant of the White House. It's about respecting the rules of democracy and sovereignty. The Americans have spoken, and Europeans would do well to take note that the majority of Americans are fed up with identity politics and the problems affecting their lives. And we've been talking about the possible pendulum effect of the woke narrative. We've been warning about this for a long time. And what we're seeing is that this is happening now. Trump has his own roadmap, but Europe has its own trade and geopolitical interests that we should stand up for on the global stage. We have to stand up for Europe because the Americans are certainly doing that for themselves. So we have to do this the best we can.
Del señor Andriukaitis por...
Thank you. Mr. Andriukaitis, 1 minute.
Thank you very much indeed, the Chairman, the Commissioner. 16 times in his inauguration speech, Trump used the word great, but not one word about the EU or Ukraine. Well, if he says it enough, it must be true, right? I don't think all this greatness will actually make the US stronger, but it might leave the EU weaker. Trump's plan to overhaul US trade policies to benefit Americans' economy, or rather oligarchs, could disrupt EU trade relations, as it was during his first presidency. His rejection of initiatives like the Green Deal and climate change will create frictions with the EU, which is committed to green energy and climate actions. Trump's emphasis on US supremacy could reduce multilateral cooperation, something the European Union relies on heavily. His shameful decision to leave Paris Climate Agreement and withdraw from WHO creates a lot of challenges to our efforts to address issues of climate change and global pandemics. His previous statements about taking over Greenland on Panama are completely unacceptable in all respects. Or a shift towards protectionism, including tariffs, could damage EU trade ties, especially given that the EU is one of America's largest trading partners. Our answer should be clear. In front of those, European Union should stay united, more socially oriented, and more stronger. Thank you.
Muchas gracias. Ahora es el turno de la señora
Thank you. Ms. Chiswo, 1 minute.
Very much. I will be speaking Polish. Panie komisarzu, panie ministrze.
Commissioner, Minister, ladies and gentlemen, Europe will be strong if it manages to speak with one voice on economic and security issues. The new administration in Washington constitutes a challenge for the whole of the EU. The US remains our ally, but Europe has to be prepared for changes in US foreign policy. When it comes to European security, Poland is at the leading edge. 4.7% of its GDP is spent on defense. In order to maintain America's commitment, the other EU countries will also have to fulfill their commitments to NATO, and that will then, in turn, guarantee the security and stability of the whole region. Supporting Ukraine is very important because we can see the consequences of this war every day across the EU, including in Poland, which has become a buffer zone between East and West. And in the border regions and frontline regions like Lublin and Podlasie, their inhabitants are taking the full brunt of that war. A stable international order requires cooperation with the US. We cannot leave any space free because this space will be taken over by Beijing, by Moscow. And also, nobody from the ECR group can tell us where our members should be sitting, because that's not how democracy works.
Un minuto.
Thank you. Mr. López Istúriz, 1 minute. Thank you. So, President Trump's been re-elected, finally. It's been confirmed. It's raining in Strasbourg, but it's not the end is nigh, is it, as some were saying. It's not the end of the world, as some were saying. Come on. Europe discovered and colonised America. Let's be proud of our unity. It achieved so much in the past. It will achieve a lot in the future. Let us take up this challenge of the new US presidency the way we should, in a united fashion. Let's stop running around like headless chickens, trembling with fear in the corridors of Brussels. Come on, let's take this opportunity, take the bull by the horns and say, yes, it's going to be tough. We're going to be tough with Trump, but we can do it. And we will come out the other side all the better if we do this properly. And John McCain, my good friend, said, we need to decide on policy on the basis of what we defend, not on the basis of what we're opposed to. Start with what we want, not with what we don't want. We want to stand up for freedom and democracy. Let us stand up for those principles.
Muchas gracias. Ahora es el turno.
Thank you. Mr. Lopatka, 1 minute.
Honourable members, the United States now has an unpredictable President Donald Trump, but still remains our most important partner. Stable transatlantic axis is vital when tackling military initiatives on economic and environmental issues. A joint approach between the US and the EU is important, particularly against the backdrop of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. That will only function if we continue to work together. We need swift action, dialogue at the highest level, involving the Commission President, the High Representative and Trump's administration. The US is a key ally, and we need to nurture our shared values, democracy, freedom, rule of law. We need to fight to keep the US on our side. Thank you.
Muchas gracias. Ahora es el turno para la...
Thank you. Ms. Nerudova, 1 minute.
Dear colleagues, relations between the EU and US have always been a bit of je t'aime moi non plus situation. President Obama promised more cooperation, yet the US pivoted toward Asia. With Biden administration, we hoped for a change, but it was just a wishful dreaming. With Trump administration, we face a businessman who, despite our long shared history, won't go easy on us. It's time for us to shed our naivety and face reality. Ladies and gentlemen, this has to be a relationship of two confident sovereign partners. We need to start by holding a transatlantic summit and put everything on the table. How to end the war in Ukraine, how to avoid a trade war, and how to build a stronger, more effective partnership which moves forward. Thank you.
Muchas gracias. Ahora es el turno para la señora.
Thank you. Ms. Benjumea, 1 minute.
Gracias, Presidente.
Thank you, President. It is undeniable that the new US administration gives rise to uncertainty and possible conflict for the EU, not least because of its protectionist bent. But just because there's uncertainty, we shouldn't use that as an excuse to try to deny our own shortcomings and not engage in self-criticism. The European problem with Trump is mainly a European problem. What kind of leadership are we showing to the world? Have we got strategic thought, capacity and determination to implement it together? What are we actually doing in order to be more competitive on the global stage? In the EU, we should be strengthening our commitment to the transatlantic tie. That is absolutely vital in order to guarantee democracy and freedom, and that is ever more necessary in today's unstable, dangerous world with this threat at our borders. It is only through collaboration and this transatlantic alliance, that we will be able to stand up in Europe and defend both our own trade and security. Let us not lose this opportunity. Thank you. Mr. Ferber, 1 minute.
Herr President, ladies and gentlemen, yesterday the new administration took power, and if Mr. Trump only fulfills a fraction of his promises, then I think the wind will prove very cold very quickly for Europe. He wants to reduce taxes, get rid of red tape, deregulate. These are things that shouldn't mean that we end up in a race to the bottom, but we need to be clear that these measures will affect the competitiveness of American companies and will increase their competitiveness. That means if we don't want to get a kick up the behind, we're going to have to react. And that means when it comes to red tape, we need to be serious about getting rid of it. We need to have moratoriums brought in. We need to reduce costs. We need to increase the single market, complete it, and the capital markets union. And we need to be strong and competitive ourselves so that we can last in that dogfight there. And that's something that is in our hands, and we should oblige ourselves to do that. Thank you.
Mr. Ferber, you have a blue card from Mr. Grasulis Petras, if you want to accept it.
Mr. I would like to ask you, don't you think that with the election of Trump in the United States have turned back towards the basic values? They've given up genderism, the enormous number of genders. Europe as well should go back to its roots, to its Christian values. Maybe we should be happy about the fact that in the strongest, the most powerful country of the world, values took over. We don't have to cry about it here in Parliament.
Well, honourable member, there's a basic idea that we need to address, and that is what links us together here at European level. In historical and cultural terms, we have common experiences. That's the way I define it. We should concentrate on that. We're not going to be successful if we start pitting one against another. We shall only be successful if we work together. And I'm looking forward to initiatives from you on that front.
Muchas gracias. Ahora es el turno para el señor.
Thank you. Mr. Bogdan, 1 minute.
Gracias. Excelențele voastre, am intrat într-o nouă eră.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've entered a new era, and if you don't understand this, you'll perish. Trump has announced straight away that he wants to support the American economy. He's not interested in military spending, but he is interested in migration, climate and gender policies. We have lost sight of jobs through a Green Deal that is full of absurdities and political correctness. We've opened our borders, we're paying welfare benefits, but we're not looking at performance. I would have liked to have heard some of what Mr. Trump said yesterday in Brussels or Strasbourg. The farmers are protesting. They're facing bankruptcy. We've seen the car industry that is not just dependent on Russian gas, but it's becoming dependent on Chinese lithium. There needs to be an understanding between the EU and the US that they have to work together to defend themselves against the Chinese and Russia. This China-Russia duo seems to work well, but what about the EU and US, that duo? We need to look at bigger budgets and human resources, technology, not least European culture and education. Romania, as an example, is deeply Christian and has brains and reserves. God bless America and Europe.
Okay, perfect. We move to the Catch the Eye. Then we have a long list of speakers, and then we don't have enough time. And what we were going to do is one speaker per group. Okay, respecting the order of the people asking for this Catch the Eye, and also taking into account all the blue cards that we had during this debate. The people that have been intervened. The first speaker will be Mr. Sokol for 1 minute.
Thank you very much.
After his inauguration, Donald Trump, by saying drill, baby, drill, ushered a new energy policy. That means that the green policy, which wants to industrialize the EU, unless we change something, will make us fall behind Russia, the US and China. So we need a U-turn so that the EU can become more competitive in all industries. For example, the biotech sector, the production of food and the defense industry. These industries must be recognized as strategic. Our entrepreneurs cannot compete in the global market if the energy prices are higher in Europe. This is why energy sovereignty must be our absolute priority. We need a wide energy mix, including hydrogen, nuclear energy, and common public procurement of energy. Ladies and gentlemen, we must make European interests our priority and not left-wing ideology.
Turno para la señora Sardone.
Thank you. Ms. Sardone, 1 minute.
Oggi, il giorno dopo.
One day on from Donald Trump taking office, here we are in the European Parliament. And a few long faces around the room, aren't there? But dare I say, a tear in a few people's eyes? Who would have guessed? He's said so many things that are actually common sense and the kind of things that we should be doing. So I don't see why everybody's engaging in so much doom and gloom. We should stop illegal immigration. Whereas the left here is saying that you should give everyone citizenship. He says we should defend national borders. That here in Europe we've been pursuing Matteo Salvini, who's been risking prison simply for defending European borders. He talks about using oil and gas, everything that's available to help business. He's against the woke ideology, whereas Brussels is enthralled to political correctness. He says Americans should be able to buy whatever cars they like. Europeans don't have that privilege. We've got this 2050 deadline for e-vehicles. So we see Trump moving forward and embarrassing inaction here.
Turno para el señor Bruczynski.
Mr. Bruczynski, 1 minute.
Bardzo dziękuję. Ponieważ...
Thank you. I am Polish and I'm a European. I would like my home country to prosper and also to see Europe be successful. And that is why I welcomed Trump's statement yesterday. He talked about common sense in politics. We need to restore common sense. I hope that this new administration in the US will lead to more common sense in Europe. We need to move away from ideological nonsense in areas such as energy security, migration, and ridiculous social engineering. An attempt to build a new society. We need to return to our common values, the Aristotelian logic, rather than new Marxist nonsense promoted by the left.
Gracias, presidente.
Thank you, President. A lot of people were talking about the world order being in danger today. With what authority can we stand up and speak out against Trump's delirium in terms of expansionism and colonialism? But what have we done about Palestine? The future of humanity is at stake there too. Who are we to point the finger at Trump? There's a slippery slope here. Trump is saying, let's use the logic of force on Greenland or wherever else. But what have we done to set up this as a precedent? I think we should engage in some self-criticism here. We have a real dilemma here. are we going to go forward on the basis of neoliberalism or our founding values, the never again of the post-war period?
Thank you. Mr. Botenga, 1 minute.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, President. Well, imagine that Russia were to say, we want just a little chunk of Denmark, or China were to say, listen, guys, we're going to annex Canada. You would all revolt, call to arms. We have to allow them to defend themselves. But America's doing that already today and more. They want Panama. They're threatening an economic war against our industry, our energy. And what does Ms. von der Leyen say? Oh, we have to intensify our relations with the US. We need to buy more American arms and energy. What is this? It's a Stockholm complex, like somebody who's been taken hostage, having sympathy for the hostage takers. NATO military alliance, is that going to save us from an attack? Hang on, from a member of NATO, the head of NATO, if you like. So in this absurd situation where we subject ourselves to the US role rather than looking wider, let's have public investment in autonomy for Europe. Let's look at other countries, what they're doing. Look at the BRICS and other alliances that are coming to light that are providing economic and trade possibilities. Let us build Europe of the future rather than stay as a trailer being dragged by the US.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you. Our final speaker, Mr. Brown.
It really is very pathetic and embarrassing. Mr. Trump didn't spare a word yesterday to even mention Europe, and here we are now debating for hours. Part of you expressing their frustration, anger and hatred. The other part expressing their gratitude and best hopes to both sides. Bad news. No cavalry is coming to save us. Even if it's coming, then it might be not for our salvation. We just have to judge and decide by ourselves. And the question is, will Europe remain the side of mass experimenting on humans and nations or not? Whether we will reject leftist, non-human, unhuman policies, as Mr. Donald Trump does in his country, in his state, or not. And this debate will not change the course of this.
You're out of time. That brings us to the end of our speakers list under Catch the Eye. I'll now hand over to Maros Sefcovic on behalf of the European Commission.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, honourable members of the European Parliament, dear Minister. First and foremost, I would like to thank you for this very important debate which highlighted unparalleled political, economic and security importance of transatlantic relationship. I appreciate your calls for constructive and early engagement with our American partners. We are prepared for the negotiations and we are ready to engage. I am convinced that among two closest strategic and biggest trade partners, there are no issues which cannot be resolved amicably and through cooperation. That's what we offer, that's what we propose, and as INTA Chairman Mr. Lange said, let's use negotiations to build stable relationship with the new US administration. Several honourable members, Mr. Szczerba, Madam Wilmez, Mr. Kallas, Madam Chaul Muro, and I think last one, Madam Vcislo, highlighted many European strengths. The biggest one of them was clearly described as our unity. Unity of our member states, unity of our institutions, and strong public support for our approach. We all know very well that when Europe is united, it gets things done. We in the European Commission are committed to work as closely as possible to consolidate our European unity and, of course, where necessary, we are prepared to defend European interests and uphold our values, because that's the European way. Mr. Vondra, Mr. McAllister and several others were asking about policy responses to this new situation driven by hyper-competition in the world. The European Commission is working very hard to present to you very soon the new roadmap, how to increase our productivity, how to close innovation gap. We are working on the clean industrial deal. We want to advance and accelerate work on the capital markets union, and we will also deliver on our commitment to present to you competitiveness compass, as well as a very solid package how to cut the red tape, as it was suggested by Mr. Ferber. At this moment, we are intensely consulting key stakeholders in key sectors of our economy, like steel, aluminium, mobility and cars, to make sure that we are up to requirements of this new age. On top of all this, we are reviewing our toolbox for beefing up EU's economic security, as suggested by Chairwoman Laluk. Madame Van Brandt was calling for closer cooperation with like-minded partners, and I can confirm that the new geoeconomics is opening new trade opportunities for the European Union with partners who see us as fair, predictable and, of course, biggest trading bloc in the world. In the last 2 months, we concluded important trade negotiations with Mercosur, Switzerland and Mexico. We significantly accelerated our talks with India, Malaysia and Indonesia, and we are pursuing with a new momentum negotiations with several partners in Southeast Asia and Africa. This is the best proof that there is huge appetite for free and fair trade, and the European Union will remain its champion, its promoter, and will continue to push for rules-based order, be it for international or trade relations. So, Mr. President, honourable members, we are open for fair business and we are open for constructive talks. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, Comisario.
Thank you, Commissioner. We'll now hear from the Council, Mr. Slapka, Minister for the European Union in the Polish government, speaking on behalf of the European Council.
Mr. President, honourable members, Mr. Commissioner, after this very interesting debate, just a few remarks on behalf of the Council. We are committed to working towards a positive agenda with the US. The world needs the US and the EU working together to promote our values and strategic aims. I am sure that transatlantic relations will remain a major topic of political discussion for the foreseeable future, and that is why debates like this are both timely and relevant, also having in mind that our priorities are security and competitiveness. But I would like to underline that the most important is to keep European unity. Thank you very much for your attention.
Muchísimas gracias. Con esto daríamos por...
Thank you. That brings us to the end of this debate. We'll move on to the next item on our agenda, Council and Commission statements, the need to detect and to counter sabotage by the Russian shadow fleet damaging critical undersea infrastructure in the Baltic Sea. We will first hear from Mr. Slapka.